Yes. Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Jensen? Here. Commissioner Sayoc?
Here.
Commissioner Machucci?
Here.
Commissioner Talasford?
Here.
Vice Chair Bourgeois?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. If you'd all join me, we can say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Commissioner Machucci to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Hey, 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 Citizen Ray.
That was a near-death experience. Okay. All right, we have the minutes of August 12th before us. Any discussion, or may I have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Sayoc.
I move to approve the minutes from August 12th, 2009.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Written communications, and I know the commissioners are all aware that we have received a number of desk items this evening. Some of us have just started on them. Some of us perhaps have not seen them. I'm going to suggest that we take somewhere around 10 minutes. I've been through them, and although they're lengthy, we have seen a number of the pages before. If you think you need more than 10 minutes, before we resume, let me know, and we'll take additional time. So starting now, let's just sit at our desks and take 10 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I also want to let the public know that there's extra copies of the desk items and the memos over here available for the community members.
Thank you. Before we continue with written communications to see if there's anything further, I did receive a card after we had already adopted the minutes. We may have moved too quickly. In any event, I have a card here from Citizen Ray, so I'd like to call on Citizen Ray for his comments on the minutes.
You're not going to penalize me time-wise for my Pledge of Allegiance, I hope.
I thought that was God. I'm sorry.
Oh, indeed. Relative to the minutes, it says here, Ray Davis commented on his opinion of the town's use of community benefit. Well, that's hardly what I said. That is a generic whitewash of my criticism, okay? And that's not the purpose of archival minutes, which the written minutes are, archival. They're only archival under state law. So my comments are to the minute taker, whose minutes have been marvelous up until now, is he needs to revert to a formal policy and stay away from the generics and quote the speaker as on the essence of what they say exactly, without any subterfuge. So relative to what she said, commented on his opinion of the town's use of community benefit, what I actually said was, in my opinion, community benefit should be renamed the town shakedown, because that's about all it is, okay? In fact, it smacks of extortion, pure and simple. The applicant, if they want to get approval, they have to agree to some kind of a shakedown. It is so ugly not to be believed. So I want to be sure the minutes reflect my opinion, because that's my opinion, okay? And lastly, commenting on staff's abuse of town code by making recommendations to Planning Commission. What it doesn't say is that, what I said was, how can the staff make discretionary judgment, good, bad, or in between, before the public has given any testimony? It's an absolute contradiction of American democracy, led by this new woman, Wendy Rooney. And Ms. Rooney, I got to tell you, you're flirting with a nickname. I'm about ready to put a nickname on you. So please think about it, okay? Show me again, I've asked you a dozen times to show me where in the town code it gives you the right to make discretionary judgments.
Thank you. Citizen Ray, I received 2 cards from you. Is that correct, or is that?
Well, one's public forum.
All right. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Well, I put it down there.
I've got it. I'm just asking you so I can be clear. That's fine. You've made your comment on the
The
minutes.
cards speak for themselves.
Sometimes
I
sometimes I don't hear them, so if you can sit down now, we'll move on.
Okay, well, you asked me a question, so I'm going to...
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I put the cards in a timely...
But I've gotten all the answer I need. Thank you.
Well,
Very simple
yeah,
question.
I need to make sure that you
But
understand.
there's no way to make sure.
You asked me the question, and I'm giving you a complete answer.
Thank you.
A complete answer, Mr. Lawyer.
This is the second warning you'll get. All right, from staff, is there anything further on written communications?
No, there's not.
All right, we have one requested continuance. Anybody have any comment on that? Commissioner Bourgeois?
I move to continue item 4, which is the BMP Ordinance and Guidelines Zoning Code Amendment A-09-01 to the meeting of September 9th.
All those any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, so now ask for any reports on this from our subcommittees. We just came from one subcommittee meeting, and I would ask Commissioner Jensen or Vice Chair Commissioner Bourgeois to make a comment.
Commissioner Bourgeois is looking at me, so the General Plan Committee did meet this afternoon. We are continuing to discuss the update of our housing element for the General Plan revision that's required. In particularly, we discussed the concept of affordable housing overlay zones, state requirements for density, bonuses for housing, and state requirements regarding emergency shelters. And I believe our next meeting is on September 9th, when we will continue to consider and discuss those items.
Thank you. Any questions? Any other subcommittee reports? Commissioner Bourgeois?
I believe also the General Plan Advisory Committee has met since our last Planning Commission meeting. I believe that was last week, where we discussed the results of the last community workshop, and we looked at new goals and policies for the 4 new elements of the general plan. We started that discussion.
Thank you. Anything further? All right, now we can move to verbal communications. I have 2 cards. One is Citizen Ray, please.
Yes. You know, folks, I've been here in this town for 10 years, doing this kind of work for 10 years. And I'm really starting to get upset with what I see as the end game of the town council permitting development just to get the tax money. It is making me so upset. That DeSantis matter, it's unbelievable. In my estimation, they did that, 3 of them, Brzezinski, McLump, and the guy that's gone, they did that to replace, if you will, a car lot. That monster mansion and that bulldozing of the mountain, the property tax will probably equal the retail sales tax from one car lot that's gone. And that, to me, is the only reason that they ignored the law. Absolutely ignored the hillside specific plan, which said do not bulldoze the ridges, and they gave permission to do exactly that with no testimony from the planning department to the contrary. I mean, it is so ugly here in Los Gatos, it makes me sick. And can we do something about it? Well, we're going to try, okay? We're going to point the figure. Right off the bat, I want to be sure you understand the fact that the town of Los Gatos this year operates on a budget of $32 million, annual budget, $32 million. The town of Saratoga operates on a budget of $16 million, 1/2, okay? Town of Saratoga has 30,000 people. The town of Los Gatos has 30,500. So what does that tell you? That tells you something's wrong in Los Gatos. And I say, to emphasize this wrongness, we ought to rename the town Bloatsville. Bloatsville, USA. Because it is so ugly. The property tax for the town of Los Gatos is this year $8 million. The retail tax for Los Gatos this year, $9 million. The property tax is almost equal to the retail sales tax. It's unbelievable. It's disgusting. One more year of the same go-around, and next year the property tax will be more than the retail tax. It is a cat house. The best little cat house west of the Mississippi.
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
Serves the dollar bill.
The next speaker I have on the public verbal communications is Tony Jeans.
Tony Jeans, 170 Stacia Street, Los Gatos. Just want to make a general, not a specific comment about desk items. Just reading the little cards that get sent out. If these cards could also include the language suggesting that people might want to send in written communications no later than 1 week prior to the hearing, then we'd get possibly less desk items. I know some people use it as games. Other people are ill, suddenly have something comes up and they can't show up at a hearing and want to put in some communication. But a 20-page desk item that we all have to read shortly before a hearing makes it very difficult. In this particular instance on item 2, I'd like to treat that as something I can rebut and ask you to consider whether I can have 2 extra minutes in rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the verbal communications, and we can move to the continued public hearing, which is 15928 Union Avenue. It's item number 2. I'm sorry, 8 Station Way. That was on the consent calendar. And perhaps did anybody have a motion on the consent calendar? I missed that, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Johnson?
We did receive a desk item on that, and I did not take it to raise any kind of issues with the application itself. So my motion is to approve item number 1 on the consent calendar, which is APN 52, no, that's not it. That's right. APN 52903-020. No, I'm sorry, UP 09005 with the conditions and findings as contained in the staff report.
Is there a second? Yes. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It passes unanimously. And now, for item number 2, continued public hearing, 15928 Union Avenue. May we have a staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Associate Planner Suzanne Davis will be presenting the item.
Just for the record, the desk item that you received for this particular application did include a petition from Panorama residents stating an objection to the reduced cul-de-sac that's being proposed. There were also 2 letters from neighbors. One is addressing the State Subdivision Map Act conditions, and the other was raising some concerns about neighborhood compatibility. There's also a revised mitigated negative declaration, and the sole reason for that is that there was an errant sentence that was included in the original negative deck that should not have been there, so we just corrected the statement to take that language out and be clear that the requirement was pertaining to nesting birds and bats that may be on the property, and that ties into the mitigation measure that's attached to the mitigated negative deck. There's also a response to comments on the mitigated negative deck and an initial study that came in during the public comment period that ended on August 17th. And so we just did line by line different issues and gave you some further information. And I apologize that it was this late. We got a lot of letters on this property at the last minute, and there was a lot of work to go through all that information. To give you some background, since it's been a while since you've seen this application, this property is located on the east side of Union Avenue, north of Blossom Hill Road. The property has frontage directly on Union Avenue. Panorama Way ends at the north property line at the rear of the land. Property is just over 40,000 square feet and is currently occupied by a single-family home and garage. There is an architecture and site application, and that is for demolition of the single-family residence, and a tentative map application proposing to subdivide this property into 3 lots. Parcel 1 would be accessed from Union Avenue, and parcels 2 and 3 have access from Panorama. A cul-de-sac is proposed to be constructed at the end of Panorama to provide a turnaround. There are 2 options. One is a reduced cul-de-sac that is shown on the plan, and that is the applicant's proposal. There's also the opportunity to have a full-size cul-de-sac if that's, the neighbors are now indicating a desire for that. That is shown on an optional exhibit. There's a second tentative map exhibit in there showing a conforming cul-de-sac. The proposal is also to construct 3 new homes should the subdivision be approved. The Commission considered this project in February 25th, 2009, and continued the matter asking the applicant for that second exhibit showing the conforming cul-de-sac. And at that time, there was a question as to whether environmental review was necessary. We did go and conduct the environmental review. We had a town consultant prepare the initial study and negative declaration. That was sent out in July, and we did a 30-day review on it rather than the typical 20 days. We ran the document through the state clearinghouse to make sure there weren't any comments from state agencies. We did not receive any comments from any reviewing agencies, including state agencies that received it from the state clearinghouse. We did receive the 3 letters from neighbors on the document, which have been addressed in the comments that we provided to you on the desk item. The concerns neighbors have brought up about the project include neighborhood compatibility. That includes lot size, configuration, and the future house size, view preservation, visual impact, privacy, traffic and safety on Panorama Way, and drainage. The Planning Commission has the option to approve the project, and if you do that, you need to, there's a series of steps that would be necessary, including making a negative declaration, adopting a corresponding mitigation monitoring plan, making the findings for demolition of the single-family home, and then there are findings for the Subdivision Map Act that if you make any of those findings would be grounds for denial of the subdivision. The application does require action to be taken this evening. The Permit Streamlining Act has a 50-day requirement for subdivisions, and that is September 1st. So that we do need an action on the property, or excuse me, on the application this evening, unless the applicant agrees to waive that requirement. And staff is available if you have any questions.
Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Machici.
Yeah, mine's kind of an if question. I know we're not looking at architecture tonight, but if the garage on parcel 3, if the door is on the driveway side that I see here,
Oh, you're looking at the conceptual development plan?
looking at conceptual development. Okay. Does that make parcel 2 a flag lot?
It's not technically a flag lot because there's a cul-de-sac. The minimum frontage requirement on a cul-de-sac is 30 feet, which that property has. It does have a flag lot configuration, and that was done intentionally to provide a greater setback from the north property line by putting the sort of a corridor into that lot. They can do the shared driveway approach for the 2 homes on parcels 2 and 3, and then the houses would have to be set back further because of the way the lot lines have been proposed. But it isn't required to be that way. It could be done in a different configuration.
All right.
Other questions? All right, before I ask the applicant to come forward, I would like the record to reflect that in the desk item we received, as Ms. Davis commented, there are attached to it an email which is dated the 24th, a petition which was received today, and another email received today, including about 8 pages. Because of that, I am inclined, unless the commissioners would disagree with me, to give the applicant a minute or 2 more, simply because there's brand new stuff that he would not have seen before this evening. So if I hear any opposition to that, we'll consider it. If not, I will allow the applicant an additional 2 minutes. So that having been said, I would ask Mr. Jeans to come forward for the applicant.
It's up to you.
Tony Jeans, 170 Stacia Street, Los Gatos.
Let me just make sure we're doing 7 minutes now. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, we've been a long journey to get here, and part of that was us trying to do what we felt was best for the neighborhood and the immediate neighbors. I'd like to look at several issues that we've already addressed briefly, but it was a long time ago, so I'd like to go over them again. One is compatibility for the neighborhood. The 3 lots that we're proposing are each in excess of 10,000 feet. This is an R18 zoning area. All of the lots on Panorama are 8,000 to 9,000 feet. There are 8,000 to 9,000 feet lots over here, larger lots here, and the same size lots here. What we feel, therefore, is that the immediate density, after giving away a dedication on Union and a dedication for Panorama, provides a density that is compatible with the neighborhood. Another area that we looked at seriously was how we could provide Mr. Mangano's early request back in October, November, whenever it was I first met with Mr. Mangano, to allow him to have a view of the hills from his kitchen and his porch here. He said that the houses that had been built on Leawood Court were very elevated, and he did not want us to block the views that remained between those houses of the hills. We went to extreme consideration trying to achieve that, and we did that by pushing the new home locations away from that property line, by creating a shared driveway so that he has a 50-foot minimum setback from his kitchen window to where we would be required to design that house based on setbacks. that there would be a 70-foot setback here, and the view shed would go straight between the two houses that he pointed out that he wanted still to see the hills through. We did this by requesting originally a reduced cul-de-sac with no sidewalk. When we worked with the neighbors, they said they did not like the no sidewalk idea. The most compelling argument I found from the gentleman who lives in Cambrian, who said if we had no sidewalk here, then trucks and such like would be permanently banging into his fence, and the fence would be right at the curb. So a combination of circumstances, the request for the sidewalk by the people on Panorama, and the fact that I thought it gave better protection to the fence, meant that both of the applications that we have in front of you today, the two tentative maps, the slightly smaller cul-de-sac bulb and the slightly larger cul-de-sac bulb, contain a sidewalk, both for safety and making sure that the fences survive. This particular one is the slightly smaller cul-de-sac. It has a 32-foot interior radius curb to curb, 64 feet across. It is exactly the same size as that at Leeward Court, exactly, curb to curb. It is exactly the same size as the Lawson Court, directly across the street, curb to curb. It is identical. So what we have ended up with is fully compatible with all the cul-de-sacs in the immediate neighborhood. The configuration meets the fire truck requirement. Fire has approved this slightly reduced size cul-de-sac. The other issue that I discussed last time, and I'll just go over again, is we're trying to achieve maximum separation between Ms. Leinart's house and Mr. Mangano's house to the north, so that whatever is built here is pushed as far away as possible. Additionally, I wanted the center house, which is not opposite a residence, to be equidistant from the Union Avenue Leinart house and the Panorama Way Mangano house. I will get into, if I get time, the difference between the two cul-de-sacs. If not, I'll deal with that at rebuttal. But suffice it to say that if this is larger, everything gets pushed this way, and two things happen. This central house will be closer to Miss Leinart's house and further from Mr. Mangano's. And Mr. Mangano will lose that view shed, which means when I get to A&S, it's going to be more difficult for me to allow him to keep views of the hills. Very specifically, there is the view line from Mr. Mangano's with the reduced size cul-de-sac. If you shift everything along, and what I've done is just superimposed one over the other, you have the smaller cul-de-sac with the sidewalk around it, the larger cul-de-sac with the sidewalk around it. You're pushing everything this way. You're blocking the view that Mr. Mangano asked me really to give him, and he now looks at the house, and it's very close.
Mr. Jeans, I think you're
It's very close to Ms. Leinart's house.
All right, thank you. Are there questions of the applicant? Thank you very much. I have a number of cards here, so I'll be... Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that question. Commissioner Sack?
Mr. Jeans, one of the questions that Commissioner Machucci had asked of staff was the flag lot configuration for parcel 2. is there an alternate design for parcel 2 that would not have a flag light configuration?
Just using this to look at the lot's shapes rather than anything else. Any any division of this into two could change this dimension. It could come further across and make this wider. What I did was took the 30-foot that I'm allowed to take, to use that to push the houses, instead of being 8 feet from Mr. Mangano's house, which is what my setback would allow to be, I pushed it back to 35 feet. I don't think I could get substantially better than 35 feet separation from Mr. Mangano's house by a different configuration. I think that this is the most appropriate configuration, given that also the shared driveway reduces the amount of impervious coverage, because I don't have to have two driveways. But this could be increased a little. I don't see to any great benefit to anyone. Clearly, to bring something off here because of the proximity of the cul-de-sac would make it not possible to build a house here. So to do something that brought a line down here would not work. So what I tried to work out was the best configuration that kept the owners on panorama views of the hills, so they could see straight down panorama, not look at a house. Mr. Mangano would not be looking at a house right up next to him, and he could still see the hills between the lots. There are other ways to do it. But I'm asked to try to take neighbors' concerns into account, and also my client's concerns into account, which is make the houses most appropriate. And the neighbors' concerns were try to give me as much separation as views of the hills as possible. I think I've achieved that.
Commissioner Machici.
Just a follow-up question. Again, related to that, you said you examined the alternative of moving the house on parcel 3, so there was an 8-foot setback? Is that what I heard?
If we were to have just two houses, which is what the neighbors would like,
Oh, then you would do that.
then you'd have two houses. I don't know. Two houses would give one house here, one house there. Mr. Mangano would have a house a lot closer.
No, I thought you were examining something other than a flag-type lot. Saying you examined it on the basis of two lots, then. Is that
I
correct?
examined this line coming out at different angles, going down here, doing one back there, one over here, to make it look less like a flag. It is not a flag. It does not meet the rules of a flag here. It meets the rules of a subdivision.
Yeah, it's a different duck, I understand that.
Yeah. But I took that line and put it here and tried to put a house here.
Okay, so you didn't examine the three lots by moving...
Not with an 8-foot setback.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. That was the question.
Sorry.
Any further questions? Commissioner Talasford.
I have a follow-up. Did you examine ever coming in off of Union Street, Union Avenue, with two homes? So that the...
No, because I don't have enough frontage on Union for two homes. I'm 5 feet short.
But in the same type of configuration, but perhaps...
Well, no, because I would not have a cul-de-sac bulb, and I'm only allowed 30-foot frontage where there is a cul-de-sac bulb. So the reason this works is I'm allowed a 30-foot frontage here going round a cul-de-sac. That is a Los Gatos rule. There is no cul-de-sac here, so sure, if I came in with a cul-de-sac, which would be silly, I could then split it down here, but there's no need for a cul-de-sac on Union. It would be inappropriate to put one there. So the only place where a cul-de-sac was obviously needed was on the end of Panorama, so that was the logical place to put the two homes, at least the access from them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
If I could shift gears a little bit, I have a couple of questions. First one's about drainage. And so reading the initial study, the mitigation for drainage is that you will design a drainage system that will not increase post-project drainage to Panorama compared with pre-project conditions. But in your letter, you state that the drainage system will, quote, reduce the drainage impact on the immediate neighbors. Now, when you say that, was that based reduce over existing conditions or reduce over the previous project design?
Over existing conditions.
Okay.
During the time that we have been waiting for the initial study to take place, we responded to comments from, I believe, Orville was the first person who brought it to our attention. Also, Mr. Mangano, who said, hey, we got a lot of water coming this way, and your project is only going to make it worse. So what we have done is this entire front lot drains to this point here. That's the natural flow of the land. The top half, the Union side of the middle lot, drains to that point there. There are intermediate attempts to mitigate drainage like ponds and such like, bioswales, and but ultimately any water that would normally have gone that way goes into that drain, goes straight along here into the storm drain on Union. So all of this water that used to flow that way is now going to be intercepted and not allowed to flow onto the neighbors' homes. We've also utilized this driveway here as a slight swale so that all of the water on the front half of the back lot and this entire lot here will go to this drainage swale, which is actually the driveway, and will not be allowed to go through to Mr. Mangano's property. It will come down here to Panorama and go along Panorama. So what we've done is we believe dramatically improve the drainage for all the neighboring lots along here. This will become more evident when we get into A&S, but at this stage, yes, we do believe we very dramatically decreased drainage on the neighbors.
Great, thank you for that. And my second question, if I may, is I wasn't clear from the plans and from the description of the location and extent of the proposed sound wall in Union. If you could,
I think the sound wall is a leftover from when 4 lots were proposed. We are not proposing a sound wall.
Okay.
We have had.
Well, I'm not crazy. I didn't see it.
We've had no design discussions about Lot 1. I will try and persuade Mr. Grant not to require me to put a sound wall there. I will fight back on that one. I don't think it's appropriate. I'll try and mitigate noise from the street in other ways. I don't like sound walls, period.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. I have a number of cards, speakers on this particular item. To the extent that you hear someone before you who says either some of the things you want to say or essentially the same thing, I would appreciate it if you would consider seconding that, so to speak, as opposed to repeating it. On the other hand, you obviously are free to say what you want to. You will each have up to 3 minutes. So I'm just going to take these cards as I find them. The first card I have is for, and you'll have to excuse me, sometimes I can't read this well. It looks like Cecilia, and I can't tell whether it's Holmberg. So Ms. Holmberg, please come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Cecilia Holmberg. My family lives at 103 Panorama. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. One of the many reasons to like living in Los Gatos...
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Just ask you to speak a little bit louder.
Sure. One of the many reasons to like living in Los Gatos is because of its charm, which is partly due to geography, but also in large part due to planning that is more careful than in some other nearby municipalities. We care what stores are in our business districts, and we care about harmoniousness in our neighborhoods, because Los Gatos is a community, not just a municipality. It's the Los Gatos way. You've all heard plenty of testimony in the past 1.5 years from the community of residents who border this property. The bottom line is that despite this lot being the junction of a patchwork of dissimilar developments, from single-story, modest-sized ranchers to large two-story executive homes, the overwhelming consensus across our otherwise dissimilar community is that approving a 3-lot subdivision and turning this property into a 6th disparate project in our neighborhood is bad for everyone but the developer. Please don't mistake our efforts to fight the subdivision application as NIMBYism. We realize the property will be developed, but we want to help develop it into something that enhances our neighborhood, not something that detracts from it. 2 single-story homes are what we in the community agree would work best with the existing single-family homes that are this property's true neighbors on Union Avenue and Panorama Way. A 3-lot subdivision will stick out like a sore thumb despite what the developer tries to tell you. Please recall that this is the same guy who submitted neighborhood support letters from people who live miles away, as well as an initial community benefits letter also full of inaccuracies, to put it kindly. Not exactly the paragon of integrity. In fact, this entire process of separating the subdivision from the residential development is an attempt at an end run around the usual careful consideration that the town would normally be able to give the development as a whole. For Jeff Grant, this is about nothing but profit. And when he's done, he's going to move on to the next project. For the rest of us, this is about forever. We're lucky enough to have beloved neighbors who have lived in their homes for 20, 30, and 40 years, who know fascinating things about our neighborhood history. For many of us who have moved in more recently, we have every intention of becoming the elder generation ourselves 20, 30, and 40 years from now, when we stand around at our annual block party and share our history with our children that we've raised here and the families who will be newcomers then. This is not a neighborhood with a transient population. We are in it for the long haul. We're deeply invested in our homes and our relationships and our community, and that's why we're going to keep fighting for this thing, for our neighborhood and for the Los Gatos way. Please do not approve a 3-lot subdivision here. The only legitimate option here is a 2-lot subdivision and with a 42-foot bulb. Thank you.
Just one second. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Next card I have is Thomas Mangano.
Thomas Mangano, 112 Panorama Way. I have 6 slides, and so that gives me 30 seconds each. We've gone from 4 homes to 3 homes, but we've also gone from 3 homes to 9,600 feet, where the original proposal was 10,400 feet. So in reality, the houses have gotten bigger. We're now talking an average of 3,300 feet per house. This is a rendering. I'm not a bird, so I need to look at things from the ground. And this is the alleyway that he would be building with this proposed driveway on the other side of my fence. It's all about parcel 2. What is parcel 2? He's saying it's a typical lot. Code. Yes, it meets code. A quarter lot says you can't have a joint driveway. So it may not be a joint driveway, and you've already questioned if it's a flagged lot. I'd also point out that this is a joint driveway. I think there's a law called Love Ladies that says you cannot count that square footage in that lot against his FAR. That's 2,000 feet that should come off his FAR. These lots are not very efficient, at least 2 and 3. There's a lot of wasted space. These are going to be gigantic houses. He's asking for maximum FARs. And if you look at partial 3, where there's a bunch of wasted space, and we've already addressed 2, these FARs become massive. And his profiles that he has on these are small first floors. There would be no mass mitigation with a second floor. This is a big issue for me. The staff in the initial report decided to ignore. He's putting the garage 35 feet away from my breakfast porch. That's the equivalent of 3 cars. It also translates to a 6 dB increase of any noise coming out of the garage. And if you look at the town code, what defines noise, it's 6 dBs in excess of normal sounds. Staff has never addressed this issue. He's trying to put the small cul-de-sac on my views. This is my view with the 37-foot view. In my letter, I've given you samples of the 37-foot cul-de-sac and the 42. There's no significant difference. I'm screwed anyway. He goes with 3 lots.
Mr. Mangano, your time is up, but if you
I have
want
a
to take...
question.
Pardon me?
I have a
Well,
question.
it'll be questions, but let me finish what you were saying, but just please do it now. And then, pardon me?
I think it's unfair for him to say that this whole design was based on an impromptu 5-minute visit that he gave me last October. He then ran off and did a design that I had no input. So I don't want him basing his whole design on a 5-minute impromptu meeting that he had with me.
Thank you. Now, are there questions of the speaker? Commissioner Jensen.
Mr. Magano, I think, had one more slide, and so I was curious to see what he had.
Thank you. The developer has done a lot to try and bring up 2 other neighborhoods. The whole crux is this. It's the flag lot. If you guys think that that's the way to go, then it's the way you're going to go. But there are no flag lots. The intent of the law says you should not have flag lots or quarter lots. This is a runaround by using the cul-de-sac rule and saying if you have 30 feet. That's not the intent of the code. The intent of the code is pie lots, and this is not a pie lot. This is a flag lot. And you've asked him for other plans. He showed you none. He showed me none. This is his let's go with 3 proposal. So the other 2 lots that he's trying to justify his mass on is Lawson and Leawood. They're not connected to Union or Panorama. So it's a false comparison. And again, the neighborhood, I'm sorry, I'm out of time.
Let's see if there are other questions. Are there other questions? Commissioner Sayoc.
One is just a point of clarification, and then the second one is a question. So you're saying that, in your opinion, a reduced width versus the standard width would not impact the view shed that you would see from your...
It's not significant, and in all honesty, it would probably, the 37 be worse because I gives him a bigger lot coverage and his far is greater, so he will build even a bigger house. And the reason he really wants a 37-foot, not a 42, is so that he can get even a bigger house. It's not about views. It's about how big of a house can I build.
Okay, so then my second question is, one can argue if we do, let's say, approve a 2-lot subdivision, it does give bigger lots, therefore one will have a bigger FAR. What's your argument to that?
If you look at my letter that I sent, I show you views of a 2-lot condition, and it's bigger. That view is bigger. So, yeah, I mean, if he wants, in a 2-lot configuration, if he wants to come in and slam a house 8 feet from my side lot, yeah, he can take all my views away if he wants to be that way. But in a 2-lot configuration, we now have a 110-foot wide lot. Additionally, he has to respect that I have my right to light and privacy. So he really can't slam a house 8 feet to my side because it's my south view and he's going to take my son away. So again, it's a false threat.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next card I have is John Schwartz.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Again, my name is John Schwartz. I live at 104 Panorama. Many of the things you've heard and seen in some of the written correspondence, I just want to touch on a few questions that I have, and I think it's worth pointing out that some of the desk items you received were in response to, or questions that we have in response to the staff report, and that is the reason they come in so late in the game. One item I wanted to point out, there's a recommendation in the staff report for the approval items for you tonight. It still references the categorical exemption under CEQA. Excuse me, not the mitigated neg deck. Just want to correct that. The conditions of approval, in my letter I requested a few extra conditions that you be added that would go a long way to alleviate some of the questions and concerns that we have. I don't see them in the conditions, and I would respectfully request that you consider them again tonight regarding drainage, construction noise barriers, and construction traffic and access. The initial study, I really do appreciate the staff's time and the consultant's time in preparing the initial study as we had requested. I think the document is very good. I have a few questions about some of the conclusions in there about biological resources, and I haven't seen the responses to comments if the staff generated them for you, so some of these may be answered, but it's still unclear to me why the conclusion is made that no suitable habitat for the dusky footed wood rat is available in the area. It's just not explained very much. And aesthetics, I had a question about the rationale for the conclusion about the aesthetic impact. To me, it's not based on the existing condition. It's based on a comparison between other development trends in the area. Land use compatibility was not specifically addressed in the initial study, and I had requested that that be added as well. The last thing I wanted to make a point of is the subdivision map act findings. I sent the email about that. Mr. Jeans and I just respectfully disagree that I do believe that subsections C and D do apply, and the evidence of that is that we can't find an example of this configuration anywhere in the city. So to me, that's evidence that physically the site is not suitable for the 3 lots. So that's all I wanted to say tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there questions? Commissioner Sayoc.
Mr. Schwartz, I do appreciate the amount of input you and your neighbors have put into this process. There's still discussion, and there's a petition that I believe you may have signed also about reduced width versus the standard. We've heard discussion of it doesn't really, like in terms of fire access, it meets all that. You do have a sidewalk. Can you also just enumerate another reason or a couple of reasons why you would prefer the standard width versus the reduced?
Sure. I did sign that petition, and I would support the standard width because it is standard. It would provide better safety, turnaround. We get a lot of turnarounds on our street. Full sidewalk, full radius, to me, would complete the end of the street better than a narrower radius. To me, I've told Mr. Mangano that I would defer to him as the lot owner adjacent to the site. If he feels that the 42-foot radius is better for him than the 37 or 35, I'm all for the larger, but I was willing to go with the smaller radius just to preserve the views if that was in fact true. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm happy to have the full size if that makes sense for Tom.
Other questions? Vice Chair, please.
Actually, this is for staff. Is the response to comments that were provided in the desk item available for folks to look at? If we could maybe point that out.
We did have copies. I think they've probably all been picked up.
Okay.
We did put copies out of it.
Since the majority of the comments were from Mr. Schwartz, I think it would be great if we could make a copy of those responses available to him.
Okay. Wendy will go make some copies right now.
Thank you. I know they're not required process-wise, so I haven't seen them, but if those have all been answered, then I'll take a look. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Bourgeois, anything else? Any other questions? Thank you. The next card I have is for Jeff Mitchell.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Mitchell. I live at 115 Panorama Way. I want to jump a little ahead of my prepared list here and just speak to the cul-de-sac question that was raised. As defined by the Los Gatos Town Code, Chapter 24, Article 5, Requirements, Standards, and Specifications, Section 2450.015, and this is in the letter that I've sent, the turning circle at the end of the cul-de-sac, it appears that the radius that's being proposed would not provide for parking. It would be no parking. Mr. Jeans referenced 2 locations in his document he submitted to existing bulbs of this nature. I visited each one of them. It is indeed true. There is no parking. Cars were actually illegally parked on one of the 2, and it made it difficult for me to turn around in my Honda CR-V. Okay, so the size is incredibly small, and again, we have lots of children in the neighborhood. We need something that is wide. We need something that has a sidewalk. We need something that allows for a turnaround. And with the proposal, if we actually did end up with 3 houses on this lot, the size of the driveways that are being allocated would fit a smart car, but you're going to have significant overflow parking for guests and even residents. And if they don't have a place to park on that bulb, they're going to start parking on our street. So, jumping past that, I wanted to point out a few objects that I sent in. Hopefully I can get through these quickly. I'm sorry. I'm going to go fast. If you'll watch what I'm talking about here, we can talk about it if you have any questions. But as far as the neighborhood goes, there's been references to the Leawood and Lawson courts being a part of the neighborhood. They are not. All you have to do is look at them physically or even in this map. They do not connect to Union Avenue. They are not a part of Panorama Way. They are their own independent, isolated neighborhoods that are next to but not a part, and they are not specifically affected by the development of the property beyond their reasonable complaint regarding the noise and the trees and things that will change in the characteristics that they see from that side. I wanted to speak briefly about the lot size and the home size. It's been inferred that the size goes up to, I think he was showing his map, 10,000, and ours are 8. Well, we're not talking about these 2 because they are not the neighborhood. These homes all fall within a 1,500 to 1,900 square foot size. They are single-story homes. They all face the same way, and they align in a specific pattern. This pattern is shown here, and what I've tried to do is to illustrate to you how we have an existing configuration of homes, and we have these 3. They do not belong. They do not fit. It is not a use that is consistent with the characteristic of the neighborhood. This I drew up as an example to say this is really what's more reasonable. And by the way, this is exactly what was done with the property that runs from Blossom Hill to Cambrian View Way in 1998. An identical parcel, actually 500 and some odd square feet larger, petitioned and requested 3 homes. They were told no. 2 lots, single-story homes. And their configuration, if you look here, and I'll show you over on this map, this is the Union Avenue. This is the lot between Blossom Hill and Cambrian. These are the houses on Union and Panorama. These are the houses on Cambrian Way and Blossom Hill. It's identical. And historically, in 1998, they deemed that it was worth retaining the integrity of the existing neighborhood. Can I continue?
No.
All right.
But there may very well be questions which might get there. Are there questions?
Do you have any other information related to this?
Do I have additional? Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. In your packet that I sent in, and I saw it was very late running because I had to gather a lot of this stuff together at the last minute, but I actually have a copy. It's in your packet from me. It's in your packet from Tom Mangano of the 1998 statement from the Planning Commission advising for 2 properties. Also, historically, if I can be, sorry, got a little sidetracked there. The town has actually told 2 other interested parties in this property when they approached the town, can we build on this and what can we build? They were told 2 houses and 2 houses only. I've got this in writing, and you have it in writing from Louise Martinez, one of our neighbors on Leawood. And I've also been in contact with the Building Works, the people that built the Cambrian Way, Blossom Hill area. They too were interested in this property, and they too were told that they could only build 2 homes on that. There's more information in the packet. And as far as the vista's views and visual characteristics, again, I point to this. The characteristics are not the same. And I just want to close by pointing that there are existing rules that clearly state and emphasize the importance of following the architecture, design, characteristics, and nature of the neighborhood. If there's ever a case for this 2920, 160, this is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Thank you very much. Or is it Busing?
Good evening. I'm Orf Busing, 15892 Union Avenue. I have a couple of comments I'd like to make, and one to the chair, a question to the staff, is that in the staff background information, it says the owner is required to dedicate 10 feet of the frontage on Union Avenue. And then on the initial study says that the tentative, the 20 feet wide dedication, I would be interested to see if it's 10 feet or 20 feet. I'm assuming it's 20 feet, and that's an error.
I think we'll clear that up when you're through.
Thank you. Secondly, I appreciate Mr. Jeans and Mr. Grant and working through some of the drainage issues that I've addressed previously. I would ask that engineering, one thing though, that when engineering takes a look at this project, that the storm drain, that would be an underground drain, the halfway is sort of something, but it would all depend upon the elevations required, and I know Mr. Jean's letter said midway or halfway. I would request that the length of the drain be as long as it possibly could be, that the minimum fall requirements would allow. And it might be halfway, it might be 3/4 of the way, and carry it back, the drainage back to Union Avenue, to the storm drain that was put in the middle of that street when the Leeward Court buildings were developed. And also, I know tonight Mr. Jeans said there would be one drain at the lot number 2. I would like to refer to the Tersini development where each lot has a drain in the backyard along with the curve. So I'm requesting that multiple drains be in there than just one in case there's something happens. Thirdly, there's reference to a circular driveway in the front. And with the tentative plan, it appears that the lot number 1 house would be at the 25-foot setback, which is the minimum required. And I guess I'm questioning how you could get a circular driveway in with just 25 feet. Should that lot and the house footprint be in that capacity? That's just a question. I think it would be right out the entryway. And those are my comments.
Are there questions?
Oh, wow, tonight.
No questions, thank you. The next card I have is for Luis Martinez.
My name is Luis Martinez, 101 Leeward Court. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here once again to just make sure that you understand that they're planning to take out every tree that's behind our backyards, which makes Los Gatos. Los Gatos is about trees and it's about the views. I went ahead and actually created, this is what the view of my house is for the backyard. You can barely see the house that is standing there right now. What he's trying to do, and he's told me different things, is that he could go ahead and put a single-story home in there if he gets the bigger lots. But then again, he's not sure yet, and what I told him is I cannot support anything unless I see the plans. They have flip-flop and a lot of different issues, and I just want to make sure that I keep my views and I get nice trees put back there. The 2-story home, as you can see, he told me I went overboard, I put too big of a house in there, but that's a small 2-story. I'm not sure exactly what he's going to plan to do there. The other point I have is there's 3 trees on the outside which are going to be taken out anyways, but those provide isolation between all the cars on Union Avenue. There's a lot of traffic going on Union. Every day it backs up like 3 blocks down because nobody can turn right going down Blossom Hill. So there's all these lights, there's all these things. Once those 3 disappear, we're going to be illuminated. I mean, I'm going to be like a lighthouse. So I don't like that. my fences as they are, since we're higher than the other lot, I can literally approach it and it's about this high. It's low. So we said, well, maybe we can make a big fence, but how big of a fence can I make? We're talking about maybe 6-8 feet, and then it starts looking ugly anyways. So trees is a much better thing to put it back there so that I get a visual, nice view out of my own backyard. What else do I have to say? I don't quite understand how you can make a decision about the lots when you haven't seen what he's going to be building there. I would like to see the whole package and say, okay, I like this better than that. Right now, I don't have enough information to make a good decision. And lastly, whatever gets approved, we request that you please provide or force them or make them put enough trees back there. There's over 15 trees being taken out, and I haven't heard anybody say anything about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any questions. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Next speaker is Stephanie Lynott. Or is it Lynott? Lynott, thank you.
Stephanie Lynott at 15910 Union Avenue. I'm on the half acre that's adjacent to the property. I will receive all three of the houses, obstructing my view, my privacy. Lot 1 on Union Avenue would certainly be impeding upon my lighting also in my house. I'm glad to hear discussion on the trees. One of the trees that was given permission to be taken down is a very large size, I think it's a Chinese elm or Japanese elm, I'm not sure which, because it would be in the way of the house, but I think really the house is in the way of the tree. It seems a little backwards to me. If that tree is taken down, I will get the back end of 2 more houses along with the new development, all going into my 2 bedrooms and my bathroom. I know that Tony had said that, I have some small windows, and I said to him, you can get a panoramic view out of a pinhole. So this impedes both my bathroom and my 2 bedrooms, my privacy, lighting, and whatnot. It has also been proposed that all traffic comes in off of Union Avenue. The construction, and I've lived through the Tersini development. It went on for 5 years. It's bulldozers, tractors, delivery trucks, construction crew. So I know that Panorama is wanting that all to come in and off of Union Avenue. I do know that the developers have funding for the back 2 houses. They plan on developing the back 2 houses first. So that would be a couple of years of traffic up and down, and then they will start the one right next door to me. So we're looking at about 4 years of construction in this area right next to my house in my yard. It's just, to me, they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. And they're trying to plop a house into the middle of something that does not belong. And I concur with anybody on Panorama that presented the layouts of the houses. It needs to be in harmony with what is going on over there. And what is in harmony are the 2 houses, single story. And this is really the last lot in this development that completes that. And you can't, the Tersini development across the street, I ended up with a sound wall, and the Tersini development had to put a single story bordering Union Avenue to be compatible with the single stories that were going on there. And that, I feel like I'm on a Meridian in 85 now. You've got 20 to 30 cars backed up every day during commute time. I'm looking at a sound wall and a house that looks, like the side of the Titanic. And it's a single-story house, so I get very concerned about the elevation and how far up these houses will be built. The drainage, I have 3 major trees along that property line, and if they put in the drainage, what roots are going to be cut from my trees? They have 2 big utility poles on that property. Where are those utility poles going to end up? So I am really getting bashed from all sides of this, and, and I know that Tony has certainly, tried to be accommodating. I appreciate that, but I say be in harmony.
Let's see if there are any questions. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Citizen Ray?
Interesting comment by the previous speaker about the size of a house relative to the Titanic. with that in mind, go up to Reservoir Road and take a look at the unbelievable monster that this man, James, has just put up on Lot 4. Talk about a Titanic, a spec house. It is unbelievable what the dollar bill will do to the judgment of these people. And you folks are the only ones that are here to serve the public and ignore the rest of the dollar bill, okay? Because we know the staff colludes with these developers in order to build money on property taxes, okay? And Machichi loves it, because that's his soul, the dollar bill. Oh, what's that finger up your nose about? You know, the more I come down here, the more disgusted I am with the way things are going here in Los Gatos, okay? You've got this new woman who I thought was going to be the answer to honesty and integrity in the public process. And she's turning out to be exactly the opposite, okay? She is just another reproduction of Looney Tune Lords. The dollar bill rules every decision, practically, that these people make. And we see it in the property tax, $8 million this year. It's unbelievable how the public process is raped on a regular basis here through the public trough of Los Gatos, which is twice as long and twice as big as the same trough in Saratoga. The public trough demands this flow of cash, okay? It is so ugly. And we got a real estate lawyer down here who goes to sleep while I'm talking. Of course he does. He doesn't want to hear any of this, because it's the truth. Borrowing from Mr. Mangiano's letter, on aesthetics, he says the project will not obstruct or remove, that is the initial study said, the project would not obstruct or remove public scenic views or vista. Premature statement. The project has not submitted building plans or constructed story poles to support the statement. And it's absolutely the truth. The initial study, the public document under the CEQA, is being raped by these employees.
Thank you, Citizen Ray.
They're happy to be of service with the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
You're finished now, Mr. Ray.
Oh, thank you.
All right. That's all the cards I have on speakers, so I recall. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Quintana. I missed that.
Yeah, no one's going to cut it off.
Lee Quintana. First of all, I'd like to say that I'd like to...
Lee, would you mind giving us your address, please?
I'm sorry. 5 Palm Avenue. I am not an immediate neighbor. However, I read the entire packet for today, and I read the neighbors' comments, and I would like to support the neighbors. I think they brought up some very relevant points. And based on that, I'd like to go back to the negative declaration, because most of those comments were made about the initial study and the negative declaration. And basically, I think you could summarize the statements as saying that the analysis was not based on all the facts, that the conclusions were based on not all the facts, and that the facts and evidence didn't support the conclusions, and that the neighbors have presented some, I think, fairly convincing evidence to support the concept that the compatibility has not been addressed. So I think your first question is whether you have an adequate negative declaration before you even get to the question of the subdivision. I I think that the land use section is particularly lacking. It does not address conformance with the general plan policies or with zoning code policies or with the regulations of the guidelines for residential development. There are a number of things in the land use section and in the conceptual design section, policies that apply. If you like, I will read the numbers to you. In addition to that, I think that I have not been able in the zoning code, at least in section 29, to come up with an example of where exceptions to the bulb width can be made. Given that, that would be an exception. And therefore it wouldn't be consistent with the zoning code. It seems to me that what they're proposing really should have been a plan development, although the same issues would have come up with the plan development, but it wouldn't have been quite as around the back. The real issue is that given the policy of the general plan, given what we know and what we don't know about the specific projects that are going to be submitted, you don't have enough information to say with surety that there will be no significant impacts. There may be or there may not be, but if there's a maybe or it's likely that it won't be an impact, and I would like extra time too since the applicant had extra time.
I'm not going to give you extra time. The reason I explained why I gave that, and you're not in the same position.
I think the public is in the same position.
I'm not going to argue with you because that's my ruling. If there are questions of Ms. Quintana, thank you very much.
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Machichi.
How many more points do you have to make?
Not very many.
Are there substantial ones, like a couple?
They're just short sentence comments.
I'd like to hear a couple of substantial ones, if I may.
Okay. Mr. Jeans talked about drainage in response to Commissioner Bourgeois' question. He did indicate that there would be less drainage going towards the neighborhood lots, but he did not address the increase in impervious surface for the whole project. And according to my calculations, the difference between existing and proposed is something like an increase of 790% for the full and 760% for the half or the reduced circle. That's very little difference in the actual drainage, but that's a huge increase for the site, and he doesn't explain how that's being kept on the site. So that was one question. Second question I had, I may have gotten to most of them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
But I'm asking you to seriously consider the adequacy of the declaration. I did have one more. I do believe that you could make a case for finding B for the Subdivision Act because while it meets the general plan density, so at a two-lot subdivision, and it doesn't address all the other policies within the general plan, which are part of the general plan.
All right, Mr. Jeans.
Firstly, responding to that, no points were made, specific points from the general plan that it does not make. I'm going to try and address quickly in 3 minutes some of these points. Storm drainage, at the moment we have a 1% slope. If we can reduce it, try and be less than 1%, then I can go more than halfway down the lot. No problem doing that. We'll talk about that offline. Drainage calcs have been submitted to engineering for this property. That addresses Lee Quintana's point. As far as trees for the Martinez property, we have told them that we will plant a row of redwood trees along their property line. They are fully in favor of that and are supporting that. That will come up at A&S time. I also want not to take out the Chinese elm because I think I can design a house on the front lot keeping the Chinese elm, even though the arborist thinks that that can be removed. I think it can be saved. I also want to try and put a replacement tree to replace a tree that has to be taken out from Ms. Leinert. That would be planted on her property. These are things that will be addressed at A&S. So don't please think that we're just trying to rape this area. Okay, we promised a 6-foot fence along the property line. We think that should be installed immediately permits are granted. That will help reduce the noise. Mr. Schwartz says a 6-foot wooden fence is needed for sound, so we'll put the 6-foot fence up permanently as a permanent fence along the property line. We'll also put 8-foot plywood barrier across Panorama Way for the duration of the project, except when we're accessing to create the cul-de-sac itself. Yes, I do believe unfortunately, Ms. Leinert, the traffic should come down from Union. That's your decision to make. I think that is how it should be accessed. I've told Ms. Leinert that we would put an additional barrier to keep the traffic at least 5 more feet away from her new fence that we will just have built to try to mitigate noise. However, we're trying to park all the traffic on site and not on Panorama and Union. Staff has determined that a neighborhood is defined by all the adjacent homes, not just the ones that the neighbors select. Therefore, the neighborhood that I have to respond to includes Cambrian, Lawson, Leawood, as well as Panorama and Union. So when we're looking at density, I'm not looking at size of houses yet. We'll do that in A&S. Every lot on Panorama has 8-foot setbacks. For Mr. Mangano to say 8 foot, I don't get a view, is terribly unfair. However, we're trying to give him 50 feet. 50 feet between his house and the house that we're proposing. This is phenomenally less. And if there's a 6-foot noise fence, the garage noise should be mitigated. I've got more to respond to, but I've run out of time.
You have run out of time. Are there questions of the applicant? No questions. Thank you. Oh, pardon me. Is there a question?
Yeah.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Sorry, I was waiting to see if Commissioner Machici was going to jump in there, but we heard a lot of evidence, a lot of concerns from the neighbors, and if you have responses to further concerns that you heard raised tonight, I'd like to hear them.
Yes. Let's go to one of the main ones. This is not a flag lot. It is very compatible with sizes of the immediate houses. I really felt that what we were providing for the neighbors in a slightly reduced size cul-de-sac was a much better view corridor for the neighbors, Mr. Mangano and Ms. Leinert. Even though we had to go to initial study in order to achieve that goal, the neighbors, including Tom Mangano, has come back and said, I'd prefer to see a full-size cul-de-sac. We would accept a full-size cul-de-sac if you really believe that that is the right way to go for this neighborhood. I do not think it is. I think when I get to A&S, I will not be able to achieve quite as good a solution for Mr. Mangano as I would otherwise. But
let me stop you for a minute. I want to say this. At some point, we've set some rules on how long the speaker gets. If you have specific questions, I think you should ask them. Otherwise, there is absolutely no control over time, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. So, Commissioner Bourgeois, if you have questions of this speaker, please ask them. And if you don't, the speaker's finished. Do you?
No, I have no more specific questions.
All right. Commissioner Machici.
I have a question of staff first, if I may. There is a sketch on Exhibit 27, second page in, the back side of that page. They're not page numbered, so it essentially shows a lot configuration here of the area. It's the memo from from Thomas Mangano. Do you have the one? Is that essentially, is that a correct type of drawing? Is there errors, any errors in that?
You're referring to the one that shows which are one-story houses and
Yeah,
which are two?
that's the one.
No, I think that's accurate.
In one of your comments you made, you indicated that for purposes of what you were considering neighborhood, that you wanted to view the whole, okay? When I look at this drawing, it appears to me that any of the homes that have entrances from Panameric Way and Union Avenue are all two-lot areas. Would you agree with that?
Was that two-story or two-lot?
No, I'm saying two lots.
Thank you.
I'm not quite sure which picture you're looking at, and
I'm looking at Exhibit 26.
on desk item 2.
27, I'm sorry, 27.
Is this on desk item 2?
No, it was in the staff report.
That's on Mr. Mangano's,
His letter of, that we received August 19th. Can you see mine from here?
I have Exhibit 27. Have you got it?
It's the page opposite Figure 5.
Okay.
Figure 6, I mean. 6.
All right, this is showing 1- and 2-story homes?
Yeah, but what it showed me also was lots, okay? Because I didn't have another drawing in this package like it. What I've just asked is, any of those homes that have entrances either from Panamera Way or Union Avenue appear to be two-lot areas. Yours is 3, correct?
Yes, but these lots are 80 feet wide, and this is 110 feet wide. So there is a significant difference between those. This lot over here was also a narrower lot. This is significantly wider, which enables us to do what we're doing. Otherwise, we would only be asking for 2.
Well, according to the other drawing, it said the lots are 16 to 20,000 on the ones that are labeled 1, the left-hand one.
These are 16 to 20,000. They haven't given away their frontage yet, which they will give away when they are developed, and that becomes dedicated to Union. They are a house at the front with typically a garage at the back. Some of those have rentals at the back. Most of them have garages. Some of them are rentals.
Okay, so at this point, I see them as very compatible, okay, and from my view, all right? I see those because of you're confined to 2 entrances here, all right? Is that correct? You're only confined.
You have an entrance here.
And they have an
And an
entrance
entrance there.
Your lot has the same limitation.
It would have an entrance here, an entrance to this one, and a lot in the center, more consistent with legal.
You've answered me. You believe that it's not compatible with those, is what you're saying. Is that correct?
I believe it is compatible in terms of the way we can design the homes.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about the lots.
It's consistent with what I have been told by the town the neighborhood is. I have to go by that. I can't, if I'm told the neighborhood is only Panorama and Union, I'll go by that. If I'm told the neighborhood is all the adjacent homes and across the street, then that's what I have to go by. I'm not changing the rules here. I mean, I'm just applying the rules that I'm given by the town.
I may ask the town then. Do you agree with that last statement you just made? Is that what was told to him?
The only difference in this particular lot versus the other ones that are to the north of this, that were split in that 2-lot configuration, is this has a cul-de-sac. And so by putting the cul-de-sac bulb, he has the ability to propose the 30 feet of frontage and get 2 lots in there. If he had to do 60 feet of frontage, we couldn't make it work.
I have no more questions for him. I'll have questions for staff later.
Okay, Commissioner Erickson?
Mr. Jeans, thank you for all the work you've gone into the project and so forth. I'm the commissioner who was not here in June when the original proposal was denied by the Planning Commission that was proposing 4 lots at that point in time.
I also was not here. I was not involved in the project at that time.
Okay, then I won't ask you the question. I wasn't aware of that.
All right. Are there other questions? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. All right. The public hearing is closed. Let me ask one question, because I told Mr. Busing I would clarify one point for him, which I haven't. Let me ask this question of staff. Apparently, at one point, we talked about a 10-foot dedication on Union, and another point, we talked about a 20-foot dedication. You heard that comment. What is the dedication?
25 feet. 25? It is shown on the plan.
Okay. At least we have that answer in the record, 25 feet. The minutes will reflect that because it's now on the record, yes. And apparently it's on the plans. So, okay, so we've closed the public hearing, and now's the time for discussion and or a motion. And so, whoever would like to lead off.
Question of staff.
Mr. Machici.
Would you, you mentioned something before about the fact that something runs out September 1st there?
When you have a subdivision application, once it's been deemed complete, we have 50 days to take action on it based on permit streamlining. So September 1st is the deadline to take action on the project. The applicant can choose to waive that requirement.
Has the applicant chosen to waive that in the event
They did waive it there, previously, but and the clock was really reset because we originally had a different date established, and then when we went back and did the environmental review, started over again. So when the environmental review was completed, then that put us back on that 50-day timetable.
Okay.
At this point, you'd have to ask the applicant if they'd be willing to waive that requirement.
If
you wanted to continue the application.
If it appears that we have to, can we ask them then? If it appears that this may be continued?
I'll make one suggestion, and then you can do as you think best. Perhaps if we discuss it, it may become apparent why a continuance either would or would not be in their interest.
Yep.
Other questions and comments? Commissioner Staff?
This is also to staff. Mr. Mangano had mentioned that there was a law, I heard it as Loveladies, that when there's a shared driveway that you had to reduce a certain amount of square footage. Do you know of this law, and can you just explain it to me and how it may affect any calculations that may have done to this point?
I'm not aware of the particular statute. It's not something I've read. He, I believe, is referring to when you have a corridor or a flag lot, you don't count the flag stem typically in calculating the land area that you use to base the maximum floor area off of. In this case, we are taking the whole lot into consideration when we figure out what the floor area maximum would be for the property. His point was that if you call it a corridor or a flag lot, then you wouldn't count that whole stem portion, and the lot wouldn't meet the minimum required size.
Commissioner Telesfor.
Yeah, I have a question of staff as well. Could we,
ladies, could we?
Question of staff. Referring to parking within the cul-de-sacs, whether it's 42 regular cul-de-sac width or whatever, or 36, will there be parking allowed? How's that going to be handled?
I'm going to ask our engineer to answer that question.
With the proposed, would they have to either red curve it or provide sign with no parking within the cul-de-sac with the proposed reduced cul-de-sac?
So there'd be no parking?
Right.
Okay.
Just so we're clear, it wasn't clear to me, would that be true also of the larger cul-de-sac?
No.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Erickson.
So let me try my question again. So I was the commissioner who wasn't here in June, and my question would be either of my fellow commissioners or the staff. Was there anything in the action or the discussion or the record, and actually I've looked at it, that when the proposal to develop it with 4 lots was denied, that would have given any direction to a subsequent applicant whether or not they should have contemplated 3 lots or 2 lots?
Either staff or any fellow commissioner have any response? The question is asked generally, so to the extent that one has a memory, would you like to weigh in?
I don't recall any direction being given in any way on what they might do. It was a denial. It was a denial based on 4 lots.
Commissioner Erickson, you did not review the recording, is that correct?
No, I did actually, but I was trying to
The reason I said that is your memory might be more fresh than ours if you've reviewed it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the minutes I looked at weren't clear to me about what all of the issues were. So I guess what I was trying to understand is, had we, and I'm making the antecedent for the we be the town now, not we, the seven of us, given, and this is a question of fairness from my perspective, given direction at that point in time, or any indication of would there be an expectation for a subsequent applicant to do that? Not that it would be direction, but as a it's a fairness question.
I understand your question. And to the best of my recollection, and not only my recollection, my impression, which is sometimes different, we did not attempt to design the lot. We felt the division was too dense. We said that, but we did not say, but if you come back with 3, you're going to get a different treatment. I don't think we said that.
Staff recommended that they reduce it from 4 to 3 with the previous proposal. It isn't specified in the motion. The motion was simply to deny it based on the applicant not being willing to reduce the number of lots.
Are there other questions or comments or a motion? Commissioner Machici, you look like a motion coming.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to deny the application. And the finding I'm making is, as soon as I find my page here, if you'd like to wait a minute. Where is the, they hid it on me this time. Here it is, okay. I really feel that this site is not physically suitable for this type of development. And the basis I'm having on that is that it has 2 entrances. It appears like we're trying to take this lot and fit in a 3rd lot into it, giving us all the problems that I see happening here. I know technically we're not calling it a flag, and I agree, technically it's not a flag, but it sure as hell smells like a flag to me. And, and on that basis, I am making a motion to deny sale.
Is there a second? Commissioner Jensen, is that a second? Or, yeah. All right. There were 2 hands up. I wasn't sure.
Yes, that is a second. I agree with Commissioner Machici. I also think that we could make the finding under subsection D of the State Subdivision Map Act that the site is not physically suitable for the proposed density of the development for the reasons that have been stated in the public hearing.
Commissioner Teleswar, I think, had her hand up.
Yeah, I would just support this. I would have seconded it. I think that, I know we're calling it a shared driveway, but in this spirit, it really presents the same issues that a flag lot would. I was out there and I walked the property today, and I kept walking it, and I kept thinking, this is just not going to work for all those reasons of sound. Driveways are very busy places. You've got cars going in and out, you've got doors slamming, you've got garage doors going up and down. There'd be no real frontage for this house in the middle. And also in that exhibit, which Exhibit 27, I think, there's a strong neighborhood pattern. It's very, very apparent of the 2 lots. And when something is that strong, how can we change it? So that's what I'm seeing. So I would agree with what's going on.
Commissioner Bourgeois, you had your questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask for clarification from the maker of the motion and the seconder. And are we taking action only on the subdivision application, or on the A&S as well? Because it seems like we could probably approve the A&S for the demolition of the existing home. I don't know if those need to be treated separately or together. So I guess my main question is, are you just making a motion on the subdivision application?
Right now, that's the only motion I have.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll have to make the other one.
We can take this in 2 motions. Commissioner Jensen?
I was just wanting to ask Mr. Korb whether a motion, if this is successful in the subdivision, precludes any need to address an architecture and site?
I believe it does, but I'm just checking the code right now, and I'm reading a little slowly. I had my eyes dilated earlier today.
Why don't we take a minute then and allow him to do that? In fact, why don't we just take a 5-minute break and allow him 5 minutes? This next item, I guess I should turn that off. The town attorney for a response.
An easy question and a not so easy answer. First, let me just say that it's staff's general recommendation under the circumstances that you not approve the ANS separate and apart from the subdivision application because they're tied together in staff's view. But let me explain very quickly what the code says. The code generally says that the planning director can approve a permit application for a demolition if there is already an approved replacement project, in essence. But it further states that if there is no approved replacement project, or there's another category for approval that's irrelevant here, then an ANS application is required to get a demo permit. So technically, you don't have to have a replacement project in order to obtain approval for demolition, so long as you've made the ANS application. But you do have to be able to make the findings that are required, including the findings concerning the impact on housing stock. The sole reason why the demo is required by the proposed subdivision in this situation is because the subdivision would result in the house straddling a property line, which can't occur. So at that point in time, you could probably make the findings necessary for demolition, but only if the subdivision is approved. If it's not approved, then you've got a viable residential structure. There would be an impact on the housing stock, and you don't have any other evidence in the record regarding any other reasons for approving it. So based on the facts, we would say that you should not separate the two applications.
So it would be denied along with.
Right.
Correct.
I'm denying both.
Yes, and let's make sure we understand the motion. With the comment of the seconder of the motion, I want to make sure that the motion is to deny based on subdivision C and D of the Subdivision Map Act, and that would include consequentially the demolition. In other words, because we're denying subdivision, we're not approving the demolition. And in fact, I guess at this moment, we're denying it.
May I ask the second one just to read? I gave my reason why I believe C was the issue. Why do you believe D is? So I can.
I think that the testimony that we've heard tonight from the neighbors, the staff reports that we've had, the mitigated declaration, all support a finding for D as well. However, it is not my motion, so if you don't wish to include D in your motion, that is fine with me. I will still second your original motion.
All right, so we have the maker of the motion agreeing to the suggestion of the seconder, and I assume the seconder now agrees with the motion as restated. All right.
Yes.
We have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? It's unanimously denied.
Appeal rights. Anyone dissatisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission may appeal the decision to the Town Council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days and must be filed in the Clerk Department. Upstairs, there are fees for filing an appeal.
All right, we're moving on to item number 3, which is 159 Statia Street. May I have the report of the staff? Marnie Mosley, I understand, will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject site is located at 159 Statia Street. The property is accessed off of a private easement, but maintains a conforming lot frontage on Statia Street itself. The applicant is proposing to construct a new second story over the existing detached garage and to attach the garage by enclosing the existing breezeway. The applicant is also proposing to construct a 664 square foot detached pool house that will replace the 148 square foot existing structure that's in the rear yard currently. The proposed addition will cause the total square footage to exceed the maximum allowable based on the hillside development standards. As you probably noticed, the main house is currently under construction, being remodeled under a separate building permit that was approved prior to this application. The town's consulting arborist reviewed the proposal. There are several trees that are being removed on the site at the owner's preference. They don't have anything to do with the proposed development, but since we had received this application, we did send it on to the arborist for him to review. He did find that those tree removals do conform to the town code for removal, and a tree removal permit will be required prior to issuance of the building permit. And tree canopy replacement will be required as per the town code requirements. No other tree impacts are expected. The town's consulting architect also reviewed the plans and recommended a few changes, basically in reference to the addition over the garage. One being the tower. He did recommend that be removed from the plans, and as you can see on the plans that you received, that tower element was removed. He also addressed the garage doors, and he recommended them being recessed. The applicant, a new architect, was brought on to the project after Larry Cannon reviewed this proposal, and the new architect decided to incorporate 3 single-car garage doors into the revision, and then to do a little bit different mirroring of with the French doors and windows above that are similar to the design shown in Cannon's option 2, without the balcony element. He did also comment on the windows, and he recommended that they be recessed, but staff looked into that, and the windows on the house itself are not recessed, and they cannot be recessed because of the wall dimensions. And so staff looked at that and determined that the better alternative would be to add matching trim around all the windows for the addition, as well as make it consistent for the house as it's being remodeled. So that will be installed, and that is a condition of approval. The proposed addition will have a minimal visual impact on the neighborhood. The floor area and floor area ratio are compatible with those in the immediate neighborhood. The addition does not create the largest house or the largest floor area ratio in the neighborhood and complies with all the requirements of the zone. No trees are being impacted as part of this application, and the architecture complies with the residential design guidelines. We did have one neighbor come in, I believe it was last week, the neighbor at 222 Hollywood Avenue. It's basically addressed in the desk item that you received today, and the neighbor and the property owner did have a discussion, and they reached a compromise to plant 18 24-inch box species that is listed in there. I didn't want to try to pronounce that and mess that up, so you have that in your desk item. And both parties seem satisfied with this compromise. Staff has not received any other comments or concerns from the neighborhood in regards to this proposal. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve this application, subject to the attached conditions. And this concludes staff's report. I'm here if you have any questions.
Are there questions of staff? There being no questions, I would ask the applicant, and we have Rick Hartman, apparently the architect for the project.
Hi, I'm Rick Hartman from Hometech Architecture, 619 North First Street. I'm the kind of the new guy brought on.
Could you lift your mic a little bit? That will help us.
I'm the new guy brought on. We just manipulated the design. The shape really didn't change too much. Got rid of a tower element and shaped it a little bit better to blend in with what's there. I did recess the garage doors, so there is some recessed elements on it. The existing house really doesn't have anything recessed. It actually has some windows that are projected windows. So it is almost opposite to recess the windows here on this one. We are talking about trim and the window trim. We'd want to match the existing house with with the window trim, so that some trim is being added to the main house that will integrate here as well. Other than that, the existing breezeway roof is in fact going to stay and be enclosed, and then the garage roof is removed and the second story put on that. So some of our square footage is actually a roofed area today that's going to be enclosed. So it's kind of like it's already there, but not really, because a bird can fly through the breezeway right now. So that's part of the square footage, but it's still in character to the homes around it. It's kind of a split level, so even though it's a two-story, it's not fully two-story above the existing house at all. Other than that, happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? All right, you'll have a chance for rebuttal. Thank you very much. I have one card from the audience, Citizen Ray.
Yes, here to speak in the public interest. I took a look at the property today, took a look at the story polls, read the staff report, and here are my thoughts. You lucky people. If I heard him correctly, the architect, he's dropped the tower out. And I think that was one of the essential things. I think that the town architect called for that. And in looking at the property, it's right on top of a ridge. Wow. Take out the tower. You know, it's got a beautiful low roof system to it, tile roof. It's a very relaxed, it's a hillside home on the top of the hillside, on the top of the ridge there. And it's pretty neat. They want to do some pop-up architecture. Add a second story. It doesn't seem to, I couldn't see any negatives as far as the neighbors are concerned, but, you know, all I did was drive by. So, it looked pretty good. But the thing that really disturbs me, again, is the fact that we have these employees doing their discretionary judgment, giving their opinion that it's okay before even the public testimony has been given. I mean, how ugly can it get? I'm asking the question, are they or are they not on the tape? They meet in private. Do they or do they not collude, scheme and collude with these developers? Unbelievable. Unbelievably ugly. The dollar bill is all that counts with this group, okay? So, this woman was supposed to bring some honesty and integrity to the public process. She's done exactly the opposite. Go back to Gilroy, as far as I'm concerned, and take your dishonesty and deceit with you. I'll be back. And count on that.
Next speaker is Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I just have a question. I think I've answered it for myself, but I'm not sure. The FAR is based on a sloping lot?
That is correct, based on the lot, the average lot slope provided and shown on the plans by a topography that was done. It is reduced by that amount.
I haven't seen the property, so I'm not going to make any comments, but I do have one other question, and that is for the trees, why not natives? Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is for Tony Jeans.
.170 Stacia Street, Los Gatos. I'm a nearby resident. I've been up, looked at the house, looked at what they're proposing. I've spoken to a couple of neighbors. I don't think there's any real objection to this. I certainly don't. I think it's very appropriate, and you got my support as being a nearby neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Hartman, Any concluding remarks? Are there any questions of Mr. Hardman? There being none, we'll close the public hearing. And I'd ask for discussion and/or a motion. Commissioner Sayoc.
I'm actually prepared to make a motion unless I see any objections from colleagues.
Please do then.
Okay. Okay, so I move to approve architecture and site application S09-013 located at 159 Stacia Street. I find that the proposed project is categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15301 of CEQA. That's contained in Exhibit 2. I can also make the required considerations as required by Section 2920.150 of the Town Code for granting approval of an A&S application. That's also in Exhibit 2. Find the requested floor area exception as appropriate given the characteristics of the site as well as the existing and proposed development based on the evidence submitted in the record. Determine that the project's in compliance with single and two-family residential design guidelines, and approve the application subject to the attached conditions in Exhibit 3, including the condition that was provided to us as a desk item regarding screening trees, and the development plans which are contained in Exhibit 8.
Is there a second? Commissioner Erickson?
Second.
Is there discussion? I'll call the question then. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? It passes unanimously. All right, the next matter is matter 5, 160 Bersano Lane. Commissioner Telesfor, I think, wants
Yes,
to say
I will.
something for the record.
Yes, I am a resident at 160 Bersano Lane, so I will be recusing myself right now.
Thank you. We'll allow some time for Commissioner Telesfor to leave the room.
Oh, before I forget, there were appeal rights on the other application. Just for the record, anyone dissatisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission regarding item number 4 may appeal the decision to the Town Council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. It must be filed in the clerk department upstairs. There are fees for filing an appeal.
Thank you. All right, may we have a staff report on the 160 Bersano Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Acting Assistant Community Development Director Sandy Bailey will be presenting the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman O'Donnell and members of the Commission. I'd like to remind the Commission as well as the public that there is a desk item on this matter, and the desk item is available over here if anyone's interested. The subject site is located at 160 Bersano Lane in the Bella Vista subdivision, which was previously known as the Villa Felice site. The applicant is requesting to modify a portion of the existing solid rear wall to match the existing adjacent open decorative wrought iron fence at 166 Bersano Lane to take advantage of the view. The wall is located on the Bella Vista site and does not share the common property line of the Vasona Terrace development, which is located south of the subject property. As noted in the desk item, an additional condition is recommended to verify the location of the wall and its footings prior to the issuance of a building permit. The length of the rear property line of the subject parcel is 50 feet. The applicant is proposing to remove 14.5 feet of their solid wall and to replace it with the open design fence. There is approximately a 21-foot setback of landscaped common area of the Vasona Terrace development, which is located from the rear property line of the subject property to the first unit of the Vasona Terrace development. Staff has received correspondence from a neighbor within the Bella Vista subdivision, which is supportive of the proposal. Staff has also received a letter from the Vasona Terrace HOA who is opposed to the project. Both of these letters are included in your staff report. The basis for the opposition is view and privacy impacts. The applicant has offered to plant a landscape screen in the common area of Vasona Terrace to mitigate any potential view and privacy impacts. This mitigation has not been accepted by the Vasona Terrace HOA. Staff has also been in contact with one of the Vasona Terrace neighbors regarding noise concerns from an air conditioning unit on the parcel that has the existing open design fence, and that's not part of this application.
In the event a noise concern is raised tonight regarding the proposed project, we have discussed the noise in the staff report. Staff supports the applicant's request since the project is consistent with the town code, the general plan, and the residential design guidelines, and that mitigation is available to mitigate potential noise and visual impacts. Although staff supports the request, there is neighborhood opposition, which staff is sensitive to, based on the history of the development of the Villa Felice site and the concerns raised by the HOA. The commission may determine that may have merit. And that includes staff's presentation.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Machichi.
I noticed in the recommendation, the statement, a soft approval is made. In order to clear up some of the public people that are attending this meeting, so I don't have to hear that same crap again, I would like to understand if the public has been privy to this memorandum that was put out explaining your role in recommendations.
No, it has not.
Okay. I might suggest you do pass that around to the public.
Suffice it to say, for tonight's purposes, and see if I'm correct, the term soft approval means it meets all of the requirements, but it may not, but nevertheless, you're not giving a strong recommendation. In other words, you're saying we can take into consideration or should take into consideration other concerns, such as the complaints of the neighbors. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, a hard, I don't know how you phrase the other one, a strong suggestion is, as the name suggests, as far as staff is concerned, is clearer on its face.
Correct.
All right. Let me ask, before we get to more questions, let me just have a show of hands. I haven't done this regularly, but I think we should do. How many have visited the site? So the full commission remaining has visited the site. Thank you. Commissioner Jensen, you had a question?
It wasn't a question. I just wanted to make a statement for the record. When I visited the site, I did run into Mr. Schaub. We did not discuss any substantive matters regarding tonight's hearing at all. We discussed process.
All right. Any other questions of staff? All right. There being none, let's see. I understand that Mr. I'm sorry. I have a card for you, don't I? Mr. Robson, you're going to speak for the motion?
Yes, I'm the applicant. Thank you, members of the commission and town staff. My name, for the record, is Mark Robeson, and my address is 2185 The Alameda, San Jose, California. I brought some slides tonight that I think will show you that we can accomplish the goal of providing a piece of the view shed to the lot that we have at Bella Vista, while also providing and respecting the privacy of our neighbor. I'd like to start with this slide here. This is the home at 160 Bersano Lane, also known as Lot 11. This portion of the fence right now is a solid masonry wall, and from here over it becomes a wrought iron fence. What we're talking about doing is replacing this 14-foot section right here. The primary view shed is out this direction. I want to point out that this is as you can see, the corner of this house, but down here, this is the corner of our neighbor's house. And at one time, the original proposal was to replace this panel as well with a wrought iron fence, and that was subsequently reduced just to the single panel and 14 feet of opening. Excuse me. What this slide will show is that this is a solid masonry fence here, and we've superimposed what the wrought iron fence will look like here, and it's tucked into the corner is the main point I want to make about this slide. This slide, I think, is the most important one that we have because it's the reason why we're here tonight. This picture is taken from inside the kitchen nook of the home, and it's really the primary view that you're going to enjoy, and it's from inside the home out underneath the trunk of that oak tree right there, and you can't really see it, but the lake is beyond, and it's a nice view, and it's the view that you'll enjoy in the morning, and it's not back towards the house, which is further to the right of this picture. With respect to privacy, as staff mentioned, This is the existing condition right here. You can just see the patio through the existing landscaping. What we're proposing is down here, and that's to put screening landscaping in with large mature box trees and 15-gallon shrubs. And we're confident, I'm confident that that can be done, and it will protect the privacy of our neighbor. The upper balcony here, we can see it now, and that's not going to change. In the next slide, you can see, and this picture is taken from the common area of the association back towards lot 11, 160 Bersano Lane. And you can see it as it exists now. There's heavy landscaping, and that's going to be replaced with this wrought iron fence section here and through that landscaping. In conclusion, I really think that this makes sense. We're able to provide an opportunity for someone to share in that view while at the same time maintaining the privacy. We're talking about a 14-foot section of fence, and as staff pointed out, it's consistent with the town policies and goals. And I ask you this evening to support the staff support for this application. Thank you very much. That concludes my remarks. If someone has questions, I'm available.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
Mr. Robson, am I correct in assuming that the masonry wall was constructed the way it was because after and as a result of the plan development process for the entire development?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Then let me say it again. The masonry wall that was constructed the way it is, was that constructed as a result of hearings and process for the plan development and then discussions with staff as to how that wall should be built?
No, it wasn't built per discussions at public hearings and with staff. It was put on the plans that way. Typically, you know, our perspective on a plan with respect to fencing is we want a consistent fence from inside a property line from one corner to the next, and we won't change it midstream because it would have been my luck that I would have built it this way and somebody would have come along and liked it a different way because it was inconsistent. In this particular application, and it was sort of it was programmed in, and we do it that way as part of our typical approach that we want a consistent fence corner to corner as much as we can. In this particular case, there's a detail that was overlooked, and that was a view. And that wasn't, that was something that we missed. And I think that, it's important to, again, to point out that the view is this direction, not back, this direction. And so I think that, I think what we're asking for does make sense, but to answer your question, it was programmed in and it was not discussed as part of the public hearing process or with staff while I was involved in the project.
Are there any other questions? Oh, pardon me, while you're still there, yes.
I just want to comment that one of the performance standards of the plan development for the Bella Vista subdivision was that the fences and walls, the details would be reviewed during architecture and site approval process. So it was at that point when the details of that wall was approved, and that was through a public hearing process.
Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois?
To follow up with staff on that, do you recall if there were any comments or concerns about the open wrought iron fence on lot 12 at that time?
I don't recall that there was any discussion about that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. You'll have an opportunity for a rebuttal.
Thank you.
The next card I have is, I believe, of the neighbor, John Shaw.
Hello, my name is John Schaub. I'm at 15400 Winchester Boulevard, number 31. It is the property immediately adjacent to the site. we're talking about. As an initial matter, I have a lot of things to say. I realize there's a 3-minute time limit. I request, to the extent I don't get in what I want, if there's other members that have submitted cards, if they could give their time to me if it comes to that point.
Let's stop the clock right now so we're not taking your time while I consider your request. I don't have Mr. Korb here. Personally, and I'll look to some guidance from my fellow commissioners, to the extent that, and I have a number of cards here, that other members who want to get up and speak want to cede some of their time. I mean, all of their time, but it's not going to be a one-for-one. But I would not be opposed to giving you more time speaking about this in consideration of their foregoing their time. I'm not trying to encourage that, but I think it's a net gain. So if anybody has any thoughts that that's the wrong way to go, I'd appreciate hearing about it.
I'll give you some history on an occurrence with the council, the town council.
Yes, thank you.
It was during the parking situation when they wanted to put paid parking on Santa Cruz. 162 people wanted to speak on the subject because they were only giving 2 minutes each. And one speaker said he would take the place of those 162 if they would give him 10 minutes. And it was approved by the council.
Sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah, so.
Now, all I'm trying to suggest, you must have a number, and this is not, again, on your time, I'm asking that question. Do you have a number in mind, how many people are willing to cede to you? Or have you talked about this?
We have, and at least one would be willing to do so.
Okay, so somebody's willing to give up to 3 minutes is what we're basically saying. And I guess my consideration would be if we gave you an additional couple of minutes, doesn't sound like a bad deal to either one of you. Would that be acceptable to you?
Yes, I appreciate that.
Who is the person that is not going to speak?
I submitted a request to speak. My name is Robert Gusky, and I would like to cede my 3 minutes to the property owner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gusky. And go ahead. What we'll do is we will add 2 minutes to your 3 minutes. Pardon me? You would like to cede too? And your name is? Okay. All right. So how about another 2 minutes?
Sounds good.
Now we're up to what, 7? Like 3 and 2 and 5, 7. Yes, I think we're up to 7. All right. So let's, when she gets this all taken care of, we'll give you 7 minutes. All right. It's your 7 minutes.
Okay. Again, my name is John Schaub. I live in unit number 31, which is immediately adjacent to the property, the site we're talking about. I bought unit number 31 in 2000 after living since 1995 in the Los Gatos Mountains. At that time, there was a old abandoned building there, and between the end of my unit and the wall that currently separates Bella Vista from Vasona Terrace, there was a nice, what I call a mini forest, densely, lots of trees in there, and it provided a lot of privacy. And that was part of my reason for deciding to buy the place. I liked it. Even though it's Vasona Terrace common property, as a practical matter, not many people other than me would go there. But it's there, and it's part of the reason why I bought it and why I stayed there for so long. Now, when I heard about the development that was planned, I attended the public hearings. I met with John Garcia, the development company person, twice during the process. During that time, I expressed concerns about privacy. I expressed concerns about the windows of the houses, the perspective. I expressed concerns about the wrought iron fence, but in the end, I thought, well, maybe that wrought iron fence there would somewhat preserve my view in that direction. In the end, it didn't quite work out that way because the way the wrought iron fence follows a zigzag path to get around the trees, it looks not very good. I mean, What happens now is the neighbor there in 166 puts a variety of materials up against that wrought iron fence, and like a wheelbarrow is positioned up against there, and other miscellaneous items, indoor furniture propped up against the fence. It really is an unsightly thing. So getting back to the timeline, the plan with the current wall was approved by the commissioners. One, as you know, was Joanne Talsfor, sitting on the commission that approved the plan. The plan was approved. I endured the construction, which lasted years. Heavy earth-moving equipment rolling over and over, creating vibrations, sound, kicking up dust. And then at some point, Commissioner Talsfor buys the property. And now Commissioner Talsfor, through John Garcia and the Santa Clara Development Company, wants to modify the plan that the same person approved. They approached me with a bull ties list of 3 items, one of which was removing the wall, and other was changing around that common area of Vasona Terrace common property, which I didn't want. I liked it the way it was. Nice trees. They weren't in the perfect condition, but they provided the same kind of privacy that I was afforded when I bought the unit. And the trees were not discussed during the times I met with John Garcia. The trees were there then, they're there now. So I said no, Vasona, and then they approached Vasona Terrace, my homeowner association. They said no. Now what's the big picture here? What they want is a view easement. And they can't, and they can't get it just by asking. They want to get a view easement without paying anything for it. I'm not asking for any payment. Vasona Terrace didn't ask for any payment, but this is a property interest. They are essentially asking to impose restrictions on Vasona Terrace common property that will preempt any other use of it. So if the Planning Commission sides with the Talsfors, it would amount to granting a views easement over someone else's property, and it would be an unlawful taking without just compensation. The Talsfors want a view easement. The landowners, Vasona Terrace, deny the request. So they're asking you to grant it. I submit to you this commission does not have the power to grant the Talsfors or Santa Clara Development Company a view easement. There's an issue about appearance of impropriety. I'm not going to talk about that. There's others that will talk about that, and that's not the strongest point anyway. And as a side note, I realize commissioners have to live in Los Gatos as a condition for being on the commission, so it shouldn't be counted against them if a matter involving their property comes up. But that'll be covered by someone else. Now, assuming that you can get beyond this taking issue, this easement issue, how this would be implemented is very problematic. The application calls for the Bella Vista to work with Vasona Terrace to put some shrubbery in there, or some kind of what they're calling a privacy screen. Now, who's that going to be maintained by? Who's going to arrange for access to Vasona Terrace property when it needs to be maintained? Where's the water come from? How's that going to be billed? And what if the Vasona Terrace is unhappy with the way Bella Vista is maintaining the privacy fence on Vasona Terrace land? Do we have to follow some procedure to get changes made to our privacy fence on our own land? It's just untenable. I reviewed the staff report. In general, it was extremely one-sided. It did not take into account several considerations. Just going through point by point. Regarding view and privacy impacts, it said the staff determined there would be no privacy impacts to either party unless someone was standing directly in front of the proposed open fence.
Please just finish up.
And my point is, why should I have to wonder if someone is there? And it says, the off-site visual landscape screen would mitigate any potential visual impacts. Wrong on at least 4 counts. First, the visual landscape screen.
I'm sorry. What I meant to say when I say finish up is shorten. So if you could finish up now, we gave you the extra time. I'm not trying. I want you to finish your A thought.
Okay. All right. Well. In conclusion, I think the strongest my point I want to make clear is what they cannot accomplish, what they want to accomplish, without having a view easement. They want to dedicate a portion of Vasona Terrace common property for their own exclusive use. That they cannot do with just by getting this body to say it's okay.
All right, thank you. The next card I have is Paul Alpern.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Alpern. I was on the Vasona Terrace board until the beginning of August.
Could we have your address? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Your address?
Okay, 15400 Winchester Boulevard, Unit 30.
Thank you.
There are many points that can be raised by opposition here, and I just want to raise a few of them. Others will raise others. I was on the board throughout the process of the creation of this subdivision, and I do want to represent that the board has always been compromise-oriented from the start, even over the objections raised by individual unit owners. I have lots of arrows in my back. I respect all the arrows in your backs, too, and I understand the emotions are hard. I really want to emphasize, normally we strive for compromise on the Vasona Terrace board. The dilemma faced is the situation where none of us on the board, and none of us, at least in the unit owners, believe that a compromise is feasible under these circumstances. There are many factors that could be raised, but the points that I regard as the most salient are as follows. Number one, even though we are compromise-oriented, we were surprised by the nature of this request because it was raised so relatively soon after a person moved into the new subdivision. Mr. Schaub had lived there for several years. He had expectations for several years. The application was not made very long after the person moved in, and the board didn't appreciate it, surprised by it. We would not have approved the wall during the process if we had thought it was just going to be sought to be changed so soon, relatively speaking, after the unit owners moved in. So the concerns of the board are as much to the process as anything, and a surprise as to the timing. The second thing, and I say this very delicately, none of us on the board, including myself, were aware of the relationship of the applicant to this very commission. I didn't know about it until just several weeks ago. I want to say this as gently as I can. Everybody here I regard as a good person, but I'm really shocked, and I'd like you to ask yourself how you would feel if you were in the board's shoes, learning something that serious with that appearance of potential impropriety on its face. I say this carefully. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I want to do the right thing. I wish a compromise were available. I really, really do. I understand that you're here to resolve a situation where a compromise couldn't be reached. So I want you to know that I respect what you're going through. I also ask you to respect how we, as very, very surprised and concerned people on the board, feel as well. That's all I want to say. I also want to reiterate that I do believe that people at Robeson's Homes did offer some compromises, and I want to make credit where it is due. They tried. I think both sides tried. I think this is one of those cases where compromise couldn't be reached, and that's the dilemma we're now at.
Are there questions of the speaker? Yes, Commissioner Sayoc.
You mentioned during your comments that you would not have approved the wall if you had known that it would have been changed. So during the, I guess, either plan development or A&S process, your board was involved in the approval of the wall design?
Actively.
Actively. And it got into specifics of a masonry wall versus a wrought iron on lots 11 versus 12?
I don't think we got into, each specific lot like that, but the structure of the wall throughout was supposed to be uniform. The structure of the certain items at the top of the wall were vigorously debated. Some of the arrows in my back occurred because some very people here who are unit owners opposed very much what I regarded as a reasonable compromise, which eventually was reached, as to what to put at the top of the wall. But I don't want to, I'm sorry if I'm getting away from...
No.
But what I want to say is the answer is yes. Your assumption is correct. Your question, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Your question is answered affirmative. Yes, we were involved, and the board expressed surprise that this request was raised relatively soon after people had moved in.
And a second, I guess I should have asked it of the previous applicant, so I apologize. It sounds like there's a couple of issues involved: privacy, screening, landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also, in your opinion, this visual easement that I'm hearing about? How does this affect Vasona Terrace as a whole? I can see how it affects an individual, but speaking as the board.
Two things. At the micro level, with respect to the specific unit, there's going to be a lot of brush, trees that are going to be clear. So you're talking about actually a long period of time where there's going to be a lot of openness while this stuff is growing. So we're thinking about this. The second issue, which is, that's the answer to the first part. The second issue, which is larger, I want to be honest with you, is real fear. We're scared that if somebody associated with the commission can, without our knowledge, make a request so soon after moving in, like moving in and then telling an existing landowner to change what they thought was their expectations of privacy when they moved in 2000, change all that. We're scared about what's going to happen next. What other requests will be made? We're thinking about the process in the future. I really want to emphasize, Robeson's Homes has offered compromises. I want that to be put into perspective. I'm not here to impugn anyone. I'm just saying that we're really scared that this process here in this commission is being used in a way which surprised the board, and I have to be honest with you, I don't think we would have supported what we did with the creation of this subdivision as readily as we did on the VTTA board if we had known that this would have been this request raised to change this unit so soon. I know it's a long-winded way of answering your question. Maybe the shortest answer I can give you is, oh my God, what's next? That's the way we feel on the board.
Mr. Matici.
Did the board approve the wrought iron fence on lot 12?
Okay. I have to apologize. I have to say I personally do not have the specific answer to your question. I know that we approved a overall structure of the wall as a board that was implemented back 2 years ago.
But through lot 11 or all the way across?
I have to, I'm very sorry, I'm going to have to defer to other people on the board who might be able to give the specifics to that specific round. I don't want to answer your question with something that I'm ignorant of.
You may not know this, but is the wall is on whose property? Is it split the properties, or is it all?
My understanding has been it's just splitting the properties.
Splitting the properties.
Okay.
It's on property 11?
Guys,
if you don't know, that's why.
The most important thing I learned in my career is never answer a question unless you're certain you have the answer. I believe the intent was to be fair and reasonable throughout. I again want to emphasize that my workings with Robeson's Homes has been that of good faith throughout.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll ask somebody else.
No more questions? Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, I do want to let people know that I, for one, if I were thinking I was doing anybody a favor and a commissioner's matter were coming before me, I would recuse myself. The problem is, if we all recuse ourselves, nothing gets done. So this is not a comfortable feeling for us. On the other hand, I think by doing this, we're trying to help the process. And I can also tell you it's not, as you've just told us, it's not a happy event. But I can assure you that, at least from my own view and my opinion of my fellow commissioners, everyone will bend over backwards to try to be fair to you and to everybody. It is not a comfortable position in. I don't think we can all recuse ourselves. I don't think that would help anybody. So we are sensitive to your concerns, and that I just wanted to throw that out so people would understand that. This is not something we look forward to. So I'll ask the next speaker, Susan Kidd.
Hi, my name is Susan Kidd, and I own the home at 166 Bersano Lane. Coming into this evening, I didn't know the type of hotbed I was jumping into. I was born here in Los Gatos in 1955. My mom and dad owned one of the first homes in Blossom Hill Manor. In 1961, they moved to Carl Avenue in Montecito. And I enjoyed a gorgeous view there out my back bedroom window of the Los Gatos Hills. I went through all the schools here in Los Gatos. In 1985, I was married and moved to Saratoga. I lived there for 23 years, and I had a beautiful view of the mountains once again. I am very, very happy to say that I am very happy to be back in Los Gatos. And one of the reasons I did buy my home, I feel very comfortable there. It is very near to my mom and dad. And we enjoyed Villa Felice. It has a lot of memories for me and my family. And my 2 brothers and 2 sisters also live in the area. I could have moved somewhere else for a lot less, but I love Los Gatos. I love the hills. I hike a lot, and I up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I love the area. I remember when Vasona Park and the lake were built. I've been to hell and back personally the last 4 years. I bought the home. I actually closed in December of 2008. I actually moved in January of 2009. And I am just now beginning my backyard. I had no idea I was offending all of these people. I've never met any of them, which brings me to my next point, that in the late 60s, there was going to be a Montecito High School built on Carl Avenue, and all of the neighbors, of course, were not crazy about having a high school on the street, but did not oppose it, and they hand-planted and watered all of the trees along the way to be a noise barrier, and that way they worked together as a community to try and solve a problem. When my husband and I lived in Saratoga, I enjoyed a 1-acre home.
If you could just finish up shortly.
Okay. Shortly then is that we work with neighbors there on tree placements without jumping to a commission. Joanne and Nick have no ulterior motives. They only want a beautiful backyard. We've dreamed of our backyards together, and we feel so elated that I have such a beautiful view, and I think they should as well be afforded a piece of the Los Gatos Mountains.
All right, thank you. Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Machici?
Your home is on Lot 12 then?
My home is Lot 12, yes.
Was the wrought iron fence there when you bought the property?
I bought the property as it was going through construction, so I don't recall if it was actually there at the time or being
When you
built.
moved in January, was the wrought iron fence there?
Yes, sir.
And do you know if that wrought iron fence is all on your property or does it split properties?
It's all on my property right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Bourgeois?
I was just curious if you've ever been able to see the Vasona Terrace neighbor from your backyard or your home.
I haven't looked that direction. I look
Okay.
at the lake and the mountains.
Thank you.
It doesn't interest me.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Jeff Bennett?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Bennett. I'm at 15400 Winchester Boulevard, number 52, and I'm a board member at Vasona Terrace as well. I happen to be a new board member, though, so I wasn't on the board when this was being approved, so I can't speak to some of the questions that have been asked. What I'm here to do, I'm going to be very brief. Number one, I just want to reinforce the Vasona Terrace's opposition to the plan. I also want to, to me, this comes down to a homeowner that wants that they're trying to improve their property at the expense of our property, and their property was purchased exactly how it is in its current state with that wall there, and I don't think that wall should come down for that reason alone, as well as the reasons that other folks have shared. And my job on the board, I think, is to prevent the chipping away of what has already been approved by this commission and is already there. And so I'm here to lend my support to our community to make sure that wall doesn't come down any further. When you read your report, it said that they had originally proposed even more of that wall being taken out, which indicates to me that where does this stop? So if you approve this tonight at 12.5 feet or whatever it is, when do they come back to get the next 12.5 feet? And I think you have to ask yourself that. Thank you.
Why don't you wait a second? Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Sack.
I actually appreciate the fact that you were not involved when the proposal was being deliberated, because then it kind of gives you a fresh perspective. But you said something that I'd like you to elaborate on. You said that the neighbor at Lot 11 should not benefit to the detriment of the neighbor at number 31. How would opening, and not looking to the future, just that specific sliver of wall, how would opening that be detrimental to Vasona Terraces?
In my opinion, I'll equate it to your own personal home. If your neighbor came to you and said, I want to take out 12 feet of my fence, and it's looking into your backyard, how would you feel? And that's the backyard of that owner over there. And even though they're showing an angle, anything that happens in that backyard is now essentially, whether it's noise or views or whatever, is polluting his privacy and the noise that could be there. So I would put yourself in his position of your neighbor taking out 12.5 feet of their fence between you and that property.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Glenn Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, for this opportunity to speak before you. I'm Glenn Roberts, 15,400 Winchester Boulevard, number 4, 35-year Los Gatos resident, 38 years in municipal government, working as a department head for another Bay Area city, somewhat familiar with the development process, resident of Vasona Terraces for the past 11 years, including during all of the process of this development that previously occurred, and about 30 years worth of experience with Villa Felice. My sister's wedding reception was on the deck of Villa Felice restaurant, about at the approximate location of the lot now before you for consideration. So I do have some pretty good background and history on the situation, and I'd be happy to answer questions subsequently if I run out of time. I oppose this, and I represent the Board of Directors, where we have voted unanimously 5-0, all of our directors opposing this request for a combination of reasons. First of all, we basically just think it's the wrong thing to do, because it will accommodate one new homeowner at the expense of another existing one, and it will sacrifice the privacy of one homeowner for the view benefit of another. And as someone earlier stated, we believe that the current owner of this lot making this request knew what they were buying when they bought it, and that fence and that wall was there. I believe that it's also a conflict with the prior zoning of the Bella Vista development project. We supported that development. I personally testified before this commission and before the town council in support of that development project, with certain understandings and agreements that were made at the time, the wall being a primary one in that regard. and I'll come back to that subsequently. I also believe that it was at least an informal, if not a formal, mitigation for the project to build and replace that wall. And I don't understand how a site and development application now can supersede a prior PD zoning requirement and condition. That is hard for me to understand. Maybe I don't understand the Los Gatos process as well as I should. We don't believe that this can be accomplished. The applicant's request before you suggests using our common open space area, and that's the primary reason why I'm here before you tonight, is representing the board in the common open space. They're proposing installing landscaping on our property to mitigate the impacts of their request. That's a pretty unusual situation where somebody wants to do something, they propose using somebody else's property as the mitigation. Normally people have to mitigate their own impacts, and that's not being proposed here. It's also been stated earlier that this is a view shed, and this could be viewed as a taking. This could be viewed as a potential inverse condemnation even, taking that property and imposing that mitigation. So we're unanimously opposed to this request. We intend to pursue it and to take whatever process steps are necessary to continue our position. So we request your denial of it with all due respect. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see if there's some questions. Questions? Thank you very much.
Nobody has a question about the wall history that was asked of other ones, because I do have the answers to those questions.
Well, let me ask a question. One of the questions early on was at what stage was the wall described? And as I understand it, it was an architectural site approval. I think that's what staff said. Do you have a different recollection? In other words, when it first came up, the wall had not been designed. Subsequently, the wall was designed and approved. Where would your involvement have come in, maybe in both places, but where did you come in there?
There were several steps in the process, and the first key point to understand is that this is not a new wall where none previously existed. This is a replacement wall for one that existed for some 30 years prior to the development of the Bella Vista project. There was, in fact, an existing masonry wall separating our Vasona Terraces project from the Villa Feliz Villa Feliz restaurant, excuse me, I said the wrong thing. And this project proposed to replace that wall to bring it up to a higher standard and a uniform appearance for their site, which we fully supported. And again, I stood before this commission and then the council supporting that proposal because we were getting a new wall to our mutual benefit at that time. My understanding is the extent of the existing masonry wall as it runs now is the same limit of length as where the original Villa Feliz wall ran to. The wrought iron piece that's been asked about was an extension beyond where the old masonry wall ended. Now what was done was the original wall straddled on the property line. And in order to replace it, we worked out a compromise with Santa Clara Development, Robson Homes, that they built the new wall behind the existing wall so that they could stage the construction. And that's why it now sits on their property by about, 6 inches to a foot offset from where the old wall was straddling the property line. But we had, to my clear recollection, an agreement in concept, first of all, when we met with Santa Clara Development, before the application even came forward. They came out, to their credit, they came out, they talked to us, they worked with us, we worked through that project with them, we reached conceptual agreement on their placement of the wall first. So that's the first stage at which this happened, which was, not any formal legal process, but clearly a part of the development initiation. That, I believe, went forward into the PD zoning, and the replacement of the wall was shown in the zoning, and later on the architectural details were worked out at site and design stage with the wall cap and other testimony that you've heard here previously. So I think there are 3 points along the way where this was discussed.
Let me understand something. You say the terrace where your sister got married was in the approximate location of this particular lot, right?
Right.
Was the terrace higher than the fence that was replaced?
No, I don't recall it that way, although my memory is not clear, but I do recall that the existing ground elevation and the initial development proposal for this area and this lot was 3 feet lower than the way it wound up actually getting built. And so the lot area has actually been raised by about 3 feet.
My recollection
of previous existing.
Of the restaurant was that there was a lovely view from the area we're talking about. Do you recall that?
Absolutely. It extended further out towards the crest or peak of the slope, as I recall.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. The last card I have is Citizen Ray.
Well, I heard all the public testimony. Marvelous. People are well informed. And I was all prepared to stand up and support the Telesfor's application, because I've seen Ms. Telesfor do some wonderful things here in the public interest. But after hearing all the opposition, I can't support it, okay, as a public interest person. In fact, I hearken back to Ms. Jensen and her point about how can you possibly go ahead with an A&S application, architectural and site application, to process this when you have a plan unit development that was used to initiate this development, okay? I think she's 100% right. If you want to modify the PUD, you do it by, which is a rezoning. You do it by a rezoning application, period, end of story. This move by the planning department with a soft approval, another one, and I hope you understand, Machichi, you can open your ears a little bit and get that crap out of them. You use the word first, okay? So, it's unbelievable to me that our brand new planning director would be using these in-round approaches, dishonest and deceitful. And she's only been here 3 or 4 months. It's ugly, ugly, ugly. So I don't see how you could possibly approve this for the reasons that I mentioned. And also, what a precedent setting. I don't think anyone's mentioned this. You approve this, and what a precedent for the next one, the next one, the next one, the next change, the next modification, the next privacy problem. And this, these people on this committee will be down here serving full time to object. If the woman from Gilroy has her way. Again, it's all about the bucks, the bucks, the bucks. Thank you. Okay, Machichi?
Mr. Robson.
Did you hear what he said?
You're through, Ray, so would you sit down, please?
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the commission. I'd like to answer or try to provide some clarification. There's about a 600-foot property line that we share with Vasona Terrace, and I was at most of the neighborhood meetings, probably all of the neighborhood meetings, and all of the focus at those meetings was on the other end of that fence. It was never on this end of the fence. Where the old fence actually stopped, we'd have to go back to a survey and find out. I don't remember where it stopped, but what I do know is this. This was wrought iron right here, and it was solid from here back. What we're talking about doing is taking a 14-foot section on our side of the property and converting it from masonry to wrought iron. And all we're doing is extending this wrought iron from here to here. That is all we are doing. And I don't think that there is a taking issue here. I don't think that there is a view easement issue here. any more than there is on any other lot. Lot 12 can look into this yard. From the second floor of this home, you can look into this yard. Nothing else changes. It's on our side of the property line. During the process, the focus was on the far end of the property. We never came out here and focused on this end of the property. I mean, it's hard to get into. There's a lot of, as you know, you were out there. There's a lot of planting. Relative to making sure that the property, though, that the fence is not straddling the property line, is off of it, I think that that there's a condition that we do a survey on this section of the fence to make sure that that's the case, and that's already been conditioned. I don't think that you have a precedent here. It doesn't make sense. The reason why the Talifers didn't pursue this, even though their view is going to be shortened, is because they're starting to look in this direction. And as the owner of Lot 12 said, she doesn't look this way. She's looking this way because that's where the view is, and that's where this view is. It's out here. There's no reason to look this way. I don't think that you're going to chip away at anything. No one else is going to want to do that. I think what we're asking for makes sense. And, it's unfortunate that it had to come to this relative to the planting and putting something on somebody else's property. The intent was just to create a win-win situation. And should anybody, come out here and look back, we wanted to, offer a compromise and provide some, protect the privacy and respect the privacy of our neighbors. And that's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Are there questions of Mr. Robeson? Commissioner Matici?
Yeah, I got a question. Questions?
Sure.
This is a what-if question. If that whole wall were to age and erode, is there an obligation for them to build the same wall again? Just as a question.
If they wanted to change the materials, yes, they would need architecture and site approval.
They would need A&S approval.
That is
but
correct.
They could change it. There's nothing saying they'd have to build the same wall again.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think Commissioner Sack.
One of the issues that I heard during the public comment period was the mitigation that you're proposing would actually occur on their property, and they are an unwilling participant. So have you looked at other mitigation measures that you could do to ensure privacy that would take place on your side of the line?
Hold just for a second. For the record, I guess we have Mr. Talifers present, and he would like to respond to your question. So if you would give us your name and address, I'd appreciate that.
Talifers, 160 Bersano Lane.
Thank you.
In answer to your question, we did look at slatting the fence so that when you, like a Venetian blind on end, so that you could see this way, but you couldn't see that way. But we felt that that wouldn't be visually cohesive to Unit 31, because it would be, he would see a wrought iron fence and then a slatted fence. From our standpoint, we don't see any comparison because we don't see the wrought iron fence in the Lot 12. So that's the only way that we could figure out to, mitigate it. There really is no reason to mitigate this. We just tried to put a privacy screen so that Mr. Shaw didn't have to look back into an ugly wall that he made many comments about, and try to make it a win-win, and it's been turned into way overblown view shed and all this other baloney that the lawyers can develop. And we just want to exist neighborly. We're 20 feet away from each other. Mr. Shaw would not meet with us. We didn't know any of these concerns until tonight. That's one reason why Los Gatos wants an open dialogue and a transparency, and to draw aspersions to my wife and to copy the newspapers and all that in their response to me just didn't sit well with us. And I'm really sad that it happened, and I think you should approve us to have this opening, and if they don't want us to put the privacy screen on their yard, then fine, I won't do it. I'm improving their property, and I believe the homeowners association has a right to all of the homeowners. If somebody wants to improve their property, then it's to the detriment of the owners of Vasona Terrace to stop me from
Mr.
doing
Calafro,
that.
let me stop you.
Okay, so I'm through.
You were going to respond to a question, and I've certainly given you latitude to go
Yeah,
further,
you've
but
been
I
good.
kind of like to
Okay.
not get
I'm
too
done.
far afield. Yes, a follow-up question? Of whom?
I guess to Mr. Talasfore. The slatted
Right.
fence.
Right.
Was that an option that you did present?
We didn't pursue that because we didn't feel that it was viable. So, but it could be on the table. In fact, we could take our wall only down 3 to 4 feet, and that would give them a 5 to 6 feet wall on their side because they're 3 feet lower than we are. So we would just take our wall down, 3 to 4 feet, and we'd have the view, they'd have a wall on their side, and that would be the compromise that I would make, and it wouldn't have to put up any view screens and all that, and it could be done all on our side, and I'd be willing to do that, I mean, we just want a little window into the view shed, and we're not going to look back into any other's property, and you were out there, you saw how densely grown it is, overgrown. And we just want to be right and neighborly and Los Gatos-like, and now it's to this point. So thank you for your time.
1 second. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I've lost myself now on where our time is.
I don't have any further comments.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Robeson before he sits down? All right, thank you very much. All right, we've heard everybody, and I'm now going to close the public meeting. And I'm going to ask, I have 2 questions of staff before we have discussion, and others of you may have questions of staff too. I've heard one procedural question which I'd like to ask, and I've heard one law question which I'd like to ask. The procedure question was the suggestion that what is before us tonight is not proper because it isn't just the approval of changing the fence, but because the suggestion is that it's really an amendment to the PUD, and therefore we're in the wrong process. So that's my first question, but let me get my second question out too, and you can respond as between yourselves. The second question goes back to the first year of law school, and that relates to view easements. And I have a fairly old, therefore, view of view easements, and I'd like some clarification because the suggestion is if a person changes their fence from a solid fence to a grilled fence or that kind of fence, you have suddenly condemned the person on the other side of the fence view easement. And so I'd like some legal response to that.
In response to your first question, a planned development is an ordinance that approves the land use. The housing, the details, those are all conceptual, and those are not reviewed until the architecture and site approval process. Through their PD process, they did have extensive plans to give you a perception of how the development was going to look. We specifically put condition or performance standards in the ordinance to deal with the detailing, which included the fences and walls, because they were not certain where some of the wall details were going to change. And it is during the architecture and site approval process where those details are reviewed and decided upon.
Thank you.
And on your second question, I think your old view of the law continues to be the current view of the law. Nobody owns views. The association has no more right to exclusive control of its view than the neighbor has a right to claim a right to that view. If, for example, you were to approve this application, or let's say the fence had been a wrought iron fence in the first place, and the HOA had the ability to make an application to construct a building, a structure of some sort that might block the view of the neighbor, they would have a right to do that. You have certain architectural and site considerations regarding view to take into consideration in deciding an application, but they don't have a right to it. It's not a property right, and there is no easement established. There was a question about conflict, but I'll wait till somebody asks about that.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions of staff? All right, can we have a discussion and/or a motion?
Just as a comment, I think one of the things I heard at the end here that wasn't part of the staff report at all was that I heard effectively 3 options on this fence. I heard a wrought iron fence that was 6 feet tall. I heard there could be a 3-foot wall that could be reduced down to 3 feet. And I also heard that they would even consider slots. So, a couple of which solved the issue of the view and so forth. I was wondering why that wasn't considered by the neighbors as part of previous conversations.
I'll just quickly jump in, if I may. I think the testimony was that there was apparently no real discussion between the neighbors.
No, I'm just saying, I wonder why there wasn't. I just stated that.
The question wasn't asked, so there was no answer. It just didn't happen.
It appears to me that an option may have been offered here at the podium, that they would consider a slot if that interferes with privacy. Or they could go to a 3-foot wall that doesn't do anything for anything.
If I may just point out, just to be clear to the audience and also to reiterate for all of you, you have a number of options. You can approve the application as made. You can deny the application as made. You can continue the application for consideration of other options, or you can approve a different type of option if you see one that seems appropriate.
Not being an attorney, can I introduce another one, if I may? If we were to approve this, let me just take that case, but with a condition that said we would like to have there be an additional meeting between the neighbors and the applicant for this, stating that they would look at various options and then come to an agreement and present it to the development director. Is that something that could be put into a motion?
You have done that in the past in very specific contexts. I would say that given the nature and tenor of the debate before the commission, the better course of action would be to continue the item and to allow that discussion to occur before you make a decision, so that you either have an option that was agreed on before you, or you understand that you don't have an option that anybody or that all parties agree upon, and thus have to make the hard decision, yes or no, regarding what you've got.
I'm presupposing I heard correctly that it could be an option. I'm not sure I heard it in the form of an option, so let me...
I'm suggesting that it's not probably the best course of action.
I heard that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Then I've got a comment if nobody else does. The biggest problem I have is that this is a fellow commissioner. While I've said that I will disassociate my mind from that, and I think I will, but if I do disassociate my mind from this, then I say someone buys a house, they look at it, and they think, wouldn't it be nice if we did this? And then the question becomes, well, it's got to be more than nice. What's the point? Who's it hurting? How is it helping? Does it comply with any applicable city ordinances or town ordinances? And I have to say, because I too have had neighbors and we've made compromises, that this does seem to be an unusually hostile situation. I've gone out to the property, I've looked at it. Standing from almost anywhere on that property, looking at this 14-foot of fence and looking out at the water, you cannot even see the other house. The one comment I heard was that somebody might leave a wheelbarrow up against that fence. Now, obviously, one suggestion was that the first 3 feet of this be solid. I mean, that would be the wheelbarrow solution, I suppose. So there are some things you can do, but there's no reason to believe, based on our town attorney's opinion, that anybody owns the other side of this fence as far as the view easement is concerned. So I think I would discharge that from my mind. The suggestion that you're going to open the floodgates of change because you make a change kind of says that people cannot make decisions as the facts come before them. I don't happen to believe in that. If this were not the Talos Force, I would have a much easier chance, because no matter what we do, it's going to look like we were biased. If we decide against the Talos Force, the question will be, well, did they decide against it because that was the easiest thing to do? If we decide in favor of the Talos Force, is it going to be they decided in favor of the Talos Force because she is the planning commissioner? So I would certainly like to hear some discussion on these points before we make our motion and decide. But I am troubled by these issues to the extent that I have said that. People can question our integrity as much as they wish. I respect each of you, and I happen to believe that the decision we make will be a principled and ethical decision. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, before anybody else says anything, just to remind the commission once again that you all live in the town. You're all legally entitled to make applications regarding, your land uses as you may have them in the town. You are all required, if you follow any, if you wish to make any kind of land use application, to follow the process that everybody else must follow. But you are legally prohibited from participating in that decision-making process because you have a fundamental material economic interest in any such application. You must step down, as Commissioner Talasfori has done. You must, in fact, leave the room. You cannot in any way attempt to influence the decision. It's my understanding that Ms. Talasfori has not in any way communicated with staff or with any of the commissioners regarding the application. She would be prohibited from doing so. And so that takes care of the legal conflict. With regard to the remainder of you're the commissioners. You don't have financial conflicts. You must make the decision. Now, if any of you have a bias, one way or another, because a commissioner is involved, then you really shouldn't be participating in the decision. You have to make your decision tonight based on the facts, the merits of the application. It doesn't matter whether a fellow commissioner lives there or anybody else in the community, or a stuffed bear for that matter. The only thing that matters is what are the facts before you, how does it apply to the rules in which this application is subject to, and how do you make your decision based on those facts?
For the record, too, I think we should be clear on this. I have, and I ask for those who wish to perhaps say something, too. I have never discussed this matter with Ms. Talasfori at all. And I assume that that is true of my fellow commissioners, but I can't speak for them. But I think since this has been raised, it would be helpful, because had I discussed it with her, I would feel like perhaps I should recuse myself. So would anybody else like to say something on that issue? Commissioner Sayoc.
Just want to clarify for the record, I have not discussed the issue with Commissioner Talasfori nor her husband. I have been to both sites, Lot 11 as well as Lot 31, and walked the area, looked at it from both vantage points. In terms of the actual application before us, past precedent for me at least is whenever there's a sliver of hope of compromise, I am the one that always will ask for a project to be brought back to staff to see if there could be further discussion so that a compromise could be reached without involving the commission. So that is the direction I'm leaning towards tonight. I would like to hear from fellow commissioners, but I'm prepared to make a motion that we send this back to staff, have staff work with both the applicant as well as the Vasona Terrace neighbor and board, and see if some of the options that were presented tonight, I heard two others. One was, I guess, a lowered fence with the wrought iron above as well as the slat. See if that is something that could be amenable to both parties involved. So I could either make a motion, okay?
If you don't mind, do you mind if we have a few more comments?
Oh,
and then make the
absolutely,
motion?
absolutely.
Thank you. Other comments? I think it would be helpful for the record if we went on record about not, to the extent you have not talked to Ms. Talasfori.
To the extent the chair is requiring us to disclose what we talked to Commissioner Talasfori, I did not talk to Commissioner Talasfori, nor her husband, nor anyone save what I indicated when I ran into Mr. Shaw this afternoon.
Yes, Please.
So just for the record, I've not discussed the project with either the commissioner, her husband, or Mr. Robeson, or any of the other parties directly involved in it. And I guess it seems to me, and the impression created, it seems to me that not what I would hope would be the adequate communication between the parties over their differences has really happened in terms of their discussion of it, that I would hope that would happen, not that they're required to do that, or that we can require them to do that, but that I would hope that they would do and work hard to some sort of a solution between the two parties. I guess I'm sympathetic with Commissioner Sayak's position, so I would be inclined to ask to lean that direction also.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Commissioner Bourgeois?
I also have not spoken to Commissioner Talsfora or her husband or anyone about this project. I would like to make a couple comments, though. And one of the concerns I heard that no one up here has addressed yet is how quickly this request came in after someone moved in. And I had just the opposite reaction. That to me made perfect sense. I think when you're planning a large development like this, you can't catch all the details, and it takes actually living in a place and to understand where a mistake was made. And I think if you stand on both sides of that fence, like when I walked into Unit 31, I didn't want to look at the fence. I wanted to look out at the lake. And peering over the fence from the backyard, it seems obvious. And when you see the pictures, the recreations of sitting in their breakfast nook and being able to look out and see a glimpse of a giant oak tree and the Sona Lake, it seems to me a very obvious oversight in the original plan. And so, but I think it takes someone living there to kind of point that out. That sort of detail get lost in the big picture of a large plan development. So that's the only comment I wanted to make, because that was a concern that I did not hear addressed by anyone up here.
Thank you. Commissioner Machici?
I did not discuss this with anyone at all, with the Telesores at all. And my comment is, and why I was asking whose property it was on, because initially I thought it was divided property, because I recall that from the original Basona thing, that the original wall area was split. So it's a wall on somebody's property, and they're not taking the approach they're going to make it all that way, which I think would, from their view, would look more consistent if it were all wrought iron rather than dividing it up. So I think they've taken into consideration already not doing that. Okay, and they're looking at something that's just providing them a view on their property, with even giving consideration to other ways. So I'm not in favor of continuing this. I think they've done what they had to do. I would do as a suggestion, on a good neighborly basis, that they kind of talk with the others and see if the other options are more viable. But I would approve it as it is, and I would make a motion that way. I wouldn't support a motion to continue at this point.
Can I ask a question of staff, and I don't know who wants to answer this, but Commissioner Machici's suggestion can go at least in two ways. One way would be the commission would approve A or B. A or B. However, we would like the parties to see if they can arrive at A or B. We're satisfied with either. And if they cannot arrive at a decision within time certain, then A is going to go or B is going to go. Can we do something like that?
Again, you can try. I think what you've already heard, and I think the record is pretty clear, is that the HOA would most likely appeal the decision immediately. So I think your chances of achieving a substantial discussion towards compromise are probably going to be compromised under those circumstances. It could happen in the future. No, I can't predict what council would do with such a situation, but it's certainly unlikely to happen in the short term. You can try to facilitate that discussion in the short term by continuing it and seeing if it's possible to bring the parties to some kind of mutually agreeable solution, which could perhaps avoid the possibility of an appeal if anybody is dissatisfied with it, if anybody would otherwise be dissatisfied with the decision.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Commissioner Sayak, who was going to make a motion, and ask her if she still wishes to make that motion.
I still would like to continue the matter. I think we've heard that although we do hope that some agreement could be reached, there is some hostility. I mean, I'm not going to avoid it. And so I think it would behoove us to bring it back to a public hearing so that, I don't know, I think it would buffer the staff also if it were in a public setting. So I would like to continue the matter to a date certain. The specific direction is that the applicant continue to work with Vasona Terrace, the specific individual that lives at Lot 30, I guess, Unit 31, as well as the board, and come to some kind of a compromise that would satisfy both parties. So.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Erickson seconds. Is there discussion? Hearing none, I will say this. I lean towards Commissioner Machichi's position. It is clear to me that the homeowners association and the homeowner feel quite wronged and have not been interested in compromise because of that. And I can understand that if that is your belief. And therefore, it does seem to me that the town attorney is probably correct. On the other hand, it might be helpful to the process if, in fact, this commission feels that we would, if we were to vote tonight, approve the request, to suggest that the request is 100%, that's what's being requested, to say that we would accept either the 100% or what turns out to be maybe it's a 60% solution or whatever it is, it's that. And again, have a time certain. That way, if they do want to appeal, they won't be inconvenienced by having to wait very long, and they can just go ahead and appeal. If it at all facilitates a compromise, they don't have to do A or B, but they just know that it's there. It could help that. But I mean, they can essentially say thank you very much, but no thank you. Rather than simply saying, we know you haven't even talked to each other, basically, on this issue, but we're sure hoping you do. And if you do in the next couple of whatever time sequence is, that'd be great. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that, but I personally would feel we were accomplishing more if we help the parties understand our real position. And maybe it's just my real position, so I just throw that out. That's all.
Excuse me. Just a quick clarification. I think I heard 3. You keep mentioning 2. Is there a reason you...
I took 2 only because the ones that occur to me is granting the request as it's come in. The only factual thing I heard that can be solved by this was the less than the full height of the fence looking through. That would, if you had some of the solid wall running up a few feet, would block normal equipment or something on the other side. I'm not sure that's necessary, but that's the only thing I've heard. There is another thing, which I didn't think of at the time. The question, we cannot impose upon the adjacent owner to allow anything to be planted on their property, let alone maintained. So if the applicant is willing to do it, they can offer it to the adjacent owner. If the adjacent owner doesn't want it, they can turn it down. So I don't think we have to deal with that issue.
But just as clarification, the third one I heard was the slotted.
I
didn't like that.
I didn't like that one,
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm, you know.
So it was a question of not liking it, not that it was.
Yes,
wasn't
I mean,
there.
somebody
Right.
could give them 3
I
choices.
just-
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
I wasn't going to make a comment, but I feel that I need to respectfully disagree with the chair and with Vice Chair Bourgeois. I don't think we're in a position to approve this and then say, and please agree. It's obvious that there's not going to be a compromise. There hasn't been a meeting. The Homeowners Association has said, we're not going to compromise. They've tried to compromise. They haven't achieved anything, and they've told us in public testimony that there's no compromise that they see. I also think there's an issue with the process. Plan developments are hard-fought, long-fought, and very detail-oriented. So in that respect, I do disagree with Vice Chair Bourgeois that you go through this agonizing plan development process where everybody comes in and gets down to the minutest detail and then discovers that a house would like to have a view. Well, if there was an existing masonry wall there, they knew where the lots were going to be, they knew where the view shed was. That should have been part of the plan development process. I'd be shocked that if it were not. And I'd be shocked if the developer, well, if it was not, which Commissioner Muchichi is telling me, no, it wasn't, okay. But it doesn't strike me that a developer would give up a view on a property that they're developing and put in a masonry wall fence without some consideration. So my concern is with the process that, to me, would be, I could see the viewpoint of saying this process was essentially meaningless to me if everybody that buys a piece of property can come in and change all of the stuff we thought about in the plan development. Now, I know that when you buy a property, of course, you might want to remodel, you might want to do something to improve the property, but from my perspective at least, the agony of the plan development process a lot of times is designed to accomplish avoiding just this type of issue. So I respectfully disagree with your viewpoints.
Other comments? Commissioner Muchichi?
Yeah, just because I would change my mind if you were correct, but I don't think you're correct. What I heard from staff was that the wall was decided at A&S. That's what I heard. And now, if I heard wrong, I'd like you to, or if you think that's wrong, I'd like you
I heard it was part of A&S, and when the way that we all know that the plan development works is you get a conceptual plan, and somebody says, and now go, after we have this ordinance, go back and decide all this in architecture and site, which we've heard is a subject of negotiation, as was the wall. I don't think a developer, and I don't know, would thoughtlessly put in a masonry wall on a view property. So I have trouble saying, well, let's ignore is too strong a word, but once you go through that process, I'm just saying, I respect you, Commissioner Muchichi, and but I just don't see it here because I have trouble with how detailed and long and how hard everyone works on a plan development. That's just one person's problem.
Okay, I think we understand the two commissioners' views. Commissioner Erickson.
I guess in my review of the considerations that need to be, the material that was presented by the staff, the basis upon which we are to make the judgment on this, the considerations that we have to take, I would have a difficult time voting against a motion that would say we should approve this, okay? I wouldn't find a basis upon which not to approve it. But that inevitably, I believe, leads to an appeal of it because there are some neighbors who have legitimate concerns that may not be fully addressable by the limitations of the strict guidelines that we have to follow to reach a decision. So my reason for supporting the motion to let it be continued is to give the parties an opportunity to come up with a potential another compromise that would meet the interest of the neighbors and the interest of the property owners who apply, and therefore avoiding what I would see as an inevitable appeal of the decision.
Let me ask staff, if we were to simply continue this evening as is suggested or as the motion is, when is the date to which it would be continued?
October 14th would be the earliest date.
Commissioner Muchichi?
Just one more comment. I'd be in favor of a continuance, but I played what if with it, and I said to myself, well, what if they don't find a compromise? And we're right back to where we were, right? So my question became, if I can find a way to say, give the opportunity for them to talk, and leave it to them to do it. Well, if they're going to appeal, they're going to appeal it anyway. If you do it next time, so why delay this action when it could come out that way anyway? So that's my rationale.
Well, I'd rather continue it than
stalemate.
Than stalemate.
Yeah.
So
I think we ought to give.
I certainly have said what I thought, but I'm not against continuing it. I just wanted to make the continuance possibly more productive. But if my fellow commissioners think just a blanket continuance is better, I couldn't argue with. I won't argue with that.
I'm still against the motion for continuing. So.
Okay. Are we ready for the Commissioner Erickson?
How would you suggest can you suggest a potential amendment to the motion that would make the continuance potentially more?
My suggestion is that we do a two-step process. One is we find that the application should be granted, but subject to a continuance to October or whatever it is, to allow the parties to determine whether they have an alternative solution that they could, both sides could agree to. If they do, then they would bring it back to us on that date certain. In other words, the approval would not be effective and therefore an appealable order until that passage of time. So it would be, if you don't reach an agreement by that, that's fine. Here's the decision, i.e. approval of the application. And then they can appeal it. But if the commission, at least the majority of the commission, feels that's premature, I'm not arguing against that. Commissioner Bourgeois, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that, but my fear in doing that is that you're stacking the deck in favor of one of the parties in negotiating. And so by just leaving it open-ended and saying, you guys need to talk, come up with a compromise. If you can't, come back to us, and then we'll make a decision one way or the other.
Well, you're absolutely right, but the reason I did that is if this commission sitting here tonight is prepared to grant this application, the deck is stacked, and I've heard 5 people, I think it is, one, I can't count, I think it's 5, say they are in favor of it. Now, maybe that's implicitly stacked. The only reason I'm saying it is I would love them to come up with a solution. And if we can help them, I mean, maybe it isn't clear, but I've heard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people essentially tell me they would grant the motion. And I'm not afraid to say that to the extent that that would help. But it isn't necessary because we have said it. So that being said, you're absolutely right. I think it could be helpful. But, let's vote on the motion, whatever. So are we prepared to, shall I call the question? Are we ready for that? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, show of hands, please. Is the motion to continue? Yes. So we have one, Commissioner Michichi is voting no. The remaining commissioners are voting yes. So it will be continued until the 14th of October, is that correct?
That's correct. So anyone following the application, there will be no additional notice of the hearing, which has been continued to October 14th. If you have any questions, contact the Community Development Department.
All right. The next matter on the agenda is a report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything other than I just want to talk a little bit about the memorandum that you received on our background memo on staff recommendations. I apologize it did not go out in the packet, and that's because this is a work in progress right now. And the test case got out a little bit beyond the work in progress. We thought that we would actually have the framework that we're working on finished in time to send that out with the packet so that you would have that information as you saw the test case. So I do apologize that that didn't happen. Our town manager is still working with the council and sharing that with them and getting final direction before we'll actually formalize that in a public document. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think the memo is pretty self-explanatory, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on it. I just want to note that hopefully by the next Planning Commission meeting, but most definitely by the one at the end of the month, you will be seeing, the end of September, you will be seeing this format of soft recommendation or soft approval, strong approval, soft denial, strong denial. So be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Erickson.
Can I just get a copy of it? It didn't make it this far down the table.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes,
I
we
have
emailed
a card, and Citizen Ray, I think, wishes to speak to the report which was just made. Is that correct? Please do.
Yes, I would like to, I assume you all have a copy of the memorandum.
Yes.
Good. I'd like to draw your attention to the second paragraph.
What do you say?
Yeah.
Second paragraph of it.
Second paragraph. In an effort to formalize and standardize staff's role relative to providing recommendations, the town manager and department heads have been drafting a framework that will assist staff, policymakers, advisors, and the public in understanding the purpose and source of staff recommendations. That says it all. Since when does an ad hoc committee of employees generate policy for the town? I thought it was all begun by, at the very least, by resolution of the lawmakers, the town council, not the employees. How can they usurp the power designated by state law and the enabling laws that the legislature comes up with, okay? This, Los Gatos is a general law city. You don't make their own laws until the legislature passes enabling legislation. And the town is allowed to copy it and make their own variation of it. But it's a copy of what has been established by the legislature. And here it says quite clearly and succinctly that the town employees put their heads together in a secret meeting and came up with a policy. I mean, outrageous. Is this Gilroy? Or I see the town manager's name is involved here. Is this Santa Cruz weird? Santa Cruz weird. Maybe that's how. Aren't you listening, Machichi?
Up to you.
No, of course not. Of course not. Santa Cruz, we all know what Santa Cruz is. And guess who came from Santa Cruz? We all know who that. And his name is right here in this memorandum. And it's, I frankly am so personally disgusted. Why don't you take down the red, white, and blue and put up a dollar bill green? Because that's all you care about. Thank you.
Good night, Ray. All right, we finished?
I have this question, Mr. Poole.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody from the public here is making an allegation that what we're doing here is against the law. So I'd like to understand if it is, because I hate to get stains.
Can't hear you, please. Please, a little more volume.
This question has been raised repeatedly.
I know.
Has been answered by the town attorney.
I'd like to hear once
There
more.
are no so deaf as those who will not hear.
Yeah. It is, just so that he may hear it, would you explain to me if what they're doing here is against any law or ordinance or?
It is the most absurd accusation I've ever heard.
Oh, it is.
Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. That answers my question. Thank you.
Being nothing further, we stand adjourned.